Everybody, thanks for coming to the Warrant Committee tonight. We are going to have a full agenda, and I thank everybody for coming earlier tonight. We'll test this out, and it will come in handy because the next couple of meetings that we have coming up are going to be equally full. We're going to start off by referring to the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes from January 25th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? 2 abstains? Okay.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, so you and Richard are abstaining. Great, thanks very much. All right, so now let's refer to the schedule just briefly here. We have a couple of changes to what I've been discussing the last couple of weeks, more like additions. Let's see if that comes out at all. Right now we're at February 1st. We have a couple of guests in the audience. We're going to go through hopefully all of those budgets tonight. If our discussion runs long, we do have some friends from the school committee here and from the library and the Board of Selectmen and the town accountant's office. So if we do go long, we're going to have to move some of these budgets into the next 2 meetings. But right now, our next meeting is scheduled for February 6th. And that's a Monday meeting. We'll be reviewing budgets for the assessor, park and rec, retirement, technology, and treasurer collector. And we also have the Milton Playground Planners group coming in to talk about their article. The next meeting after that is a Wednesday. That would be the 15th. And we have the fire needs article, the police budget, since we had to reschedule that, and then part 1 of the Board of Selectmen articles. Katie was able to confirm that she'll be able to be at that meeting today, so we'll start to go through those Board of Selectmen articles now on February 15th. We don't yet know which ones we will go through, so please review them all in advance, but I'll try to firm up with folks about, next week around which ones we're going to be doing on the 15th. We'll have the schools back for their full budget review on the 22nd. They're here tonight to give some reaction to Michael Dennehy's proposed balanced budget this evening, but we're going to go through their budget in detail on the 22nd, and a reminder to get questions to Betty. And then
Not a one yet.
And then we start looking into March. This is where I need you to hold some Mondays for us. We're going to try to keep it to one night a week as long as we can, but in March, that's not going to be able to happen. Right now, the 1st of March, Wednesday, we have Planning Board, Budget, and Articles, Town Government Study Committee articles, and Amy's also checking on scheduling the Capital Improvement Planning Committee to come in that night. For the 8th, we have Part 2 of the Board of Selectmen articles. We'll do our other budgets that night, like the Warrant Committee budget. And then possibly a budget wrap meeting. I haven't discussed this with the rest of the town leaders. We're going to need them at that meeting. So I'm not sure that it will fit on the 8th, nor am I sure right now that we'll actually be ready for it on the 8th. So it's just question mark on the schedule. I need folks to hold Monday the 13th. We might need to move that budget wrap meeting to Monday the 13th. We will meet probably on the 15th as well to discuss the contingent, non-contingent budget, and probably make our final votes make our votes that night. And if that discussion continues, we will continue it to Monday the 20th. So 2 Mondays I'm asking folks to hold in the month of March. I think it's somewhat unlikely that we'll meet on Wednesday, March 22nd, because the warrant is due to the printer that night, and Julia and I would much prefer to have it completely done the week before and just be making any last-minute typo changes on the 20th. So I don't expect that we'd have a big meeting on the 22nd. Questions on that schedule? Okay, let's do a quick subcommittee check-in. We did Betty.
Yep.
How are other folks doing? Does anybody have any concerns or problems? We're nearing the end of the nearing the end of the budgets. We've got a couple coming up on the 6th, so hopefully those conversations have already happened. Hearing none, then we probably can move on to item number 4 and ask Mr. Dennehy to come up and join us at the table.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thanks for coming in again.
Thank you for having us. I'm sure you all know town accountant Amy Dexter.
Hi.
Been working diligently in my
first 8 weeks here in the town. Before we get into the budget, I'd just like to read something that I prepared. It's brief, but I think the people of the town need to hear it. As the town accountant and I present this non-contingent budget to you tonight, please understand that the 2 months I have spent in Town Hall working on this project has truly been an awakening. By sitting with each of the department heads, examining their expenditures and understanding their operations, their wants, and their needs, I feel it is my duty and responsibility to commend each of them. Working with each of them has been a pleasure, and although I only see a snapshot of their world, the town needs to know that the passion and dedication displayed by each of their respective authorities was unwavering. Although at times we didn't agree with some numbers, I think the town has the right people in charge of each of these departments, and rest assured, the willingness of them to reach their goal on each level shall be accomplished. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this process. It was very, very engaging process. Many of the groups we met several times, and it got a bit contentious sometimes. Budget's not exactly where we would like it to be from a revenue perspective, but I'll say it again, each of the people that came in to sit down with myself, Amy, and Anne Marie Fagan are great leaders and great people to manage the town with their respective principals. So,
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
thank you.
Do you folks have some handouts that you wanted to pass out?
I'm embarrassed to say I forgot to copy them, but I can run upstairs.
Okay.
I meant the intent, Michael asked me to, and I completely forgot.
Well, I have them luckily on the screen, so we can
Okay.
refer to them there, and maybe somebody could get the copies after and bring them down.
Definitely. Sorry about that. That's my mistake.
Look, I did not send it out, no, I just got it. Is it okay if I just quickly email this to folks so that they can see it on their computers?
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to run up and, it's up to you. You probably don't want
Yeah, why don't we forge on?
to, okay.
And, yes. So I'll put the first slide up.
Yeah, so it's 3 weeks since we last were here at the Warrant Committee. Although a lot has changed. It's ironic that Groundhog Day is Friday. We're almost back where we were 3 weeks ago. Myself, Amy, Assistant TA, Paige Eppolito, Selectman Burns, Madam Chair Conlon, Tom Hurley, Bill Clark. A bunch of us went over to the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting. We heard some very good news from the governor on Saturday with respect to revenues. They expect revenues to improve roughly 4%. Unfortunately, the other shoe dropped on Wednesday when we got the cherry reports and some of the assessments that we didn't anticipate jumping. One of them jumped almost 30% on us. So couple that with the fact that we'd do some set-asides. I had hoped to negotiate both police contracts and fire contracts by last night. Since we did not, we have to move some more set-aside money for FY 17 and 18 now into that budget. So if we want to fast forward to the last slide, we can go through. Yeah,
one?
so basically, this is where we were preliminarily on January 10th and 11th. As you can see, we had a roughly $1.5 million shortfall in our non-contingent budget. The increase in state aid, as you can see, approximately $463,000. Again, I thoroughly appreciate Amy Dexter and outgoing TA Fagan for the conservative 2% decrease. So we picked up almost $500,000 with the governor's announcement of the budget increase. Some of the assessments that I had mentioned, which came in the cherry reports on Wednesday, is that negative 354 number. Some of the county taxes, retired teachers, health insurance, mosquito control, MBTA assessment, veteran services assessment, those went up to the tune of almost a little bit over $350,000. add in the net increase to the non-contingent request for our wage set-asides for the unsettled contracts. And the estimated change from that is roughly 40,000 less than where we were back on January 10th and 11th. So as much as things have changed and the numbers are much less preliminary at this point, we're still awaiting some House 1 numbers from State House, which could improve. But these are where we stand today from a revenue perspective and the shortfall that we're looking at on February 1st.
Do you have a breakdown for the increases in the state assessments?
We do, yeah. We did bring the cherry reports with us, which we can also make copies of. You can get them online at mass.gov as well, but it itemizes, and you can look at it. You can look at it by town, you can look at it by year, you can look at the entire state and take a look at it, but it is where we are today.
No, I'm just talking about the items you have there for that made up
Right.
the,
Yeah.
right.
I can go through them if you want, but so the revenue of the 354 there, 315,000 was retired teachers' health insurance increase. 14,767 was an increase in county tax. Mosquito control projects, 4,448. MBTA assessment, 11,031. Charter school sending tuition, 18,594, offset by a decrease in school choice sending tuition. There was a decrease in special ed of 4,778, and then some minor increases and decreases, all netting to that number.
Thank you.
And I can share this when I get you a
Great.
copy of the other. This sheet here shows the changes in revenue, and I just compared, this last year's, this is a comparison to last year, okay? But our original estimate on the revenues was 2% below last year, but assessments, we were holding level because you normally see such a large increase as that. Overall, they went up 10.6% over 17. So, and mainly that's that retired teachers' health insurance.
It sounds like what I'm hearing from both of you is that there were some changes from the super preliminary forecast that you
Yes.
did, which we completely expected. Because we were forecasting very, very early.
They were,
yeah.
but the unexpected part was nobody anticipated the assessments to go up by that much, and that's kind of what surprised all of us and really threw a wrinkle in the whole situation. We're used to maybe more like the revenues changing, but normally the assessments don't change as much as they did this year, so.
Okay.
And I know Glenn looked into the retired, Glenn Pavlicek from School Department looked into the retired teachers' health insurance, and it's a bit of a catch-up. He could go into detail as to what actually took place that brought that 30% spike from FY17, but
Okay.
again, this is the snapshot of where we are today. So what we've done is we've done a third, sometimes fourth and fifth series of regroupings with the departments and to tell them what our cut number is for them. And basically staying true to our methodology, which is when we started the process, the percent of accountability for the shortfall would be the percent of the accountability to cover the shortfall.
Can you explain that a little more?
Sure, so if you look, if you back up one slide, Lee Michael.
It was at the end, so I have to start over.
Yeah, right there. So if you look at the percentage of total above 2017, that percentage for the town side, it's 19.87%. What that means is that the town side, if you will, collectively was $715,000 in their non-contingent budget over their FY17 appropriation.
I understand 715,000
Okay.
over, but what is the 19.8?
So if you then jump down to the school department, their non-contingent budget was $2,883,900 over their their FY17 appropriation. So the $715 from the town over the total gets you to that percentage.
Okay.
Can I add something? So the 80 and the 20% is 700,000. It represents 20% of the total increase over fiscal 17. So the total increase of the non-contingent request over level funding of fiscal 17 less one-time free cash items was 3.9 million. So the 700,000 is 20% of that 3.9 million, and the 2.9 million on the schools is 80% of it.
Yep.
And then the town side, the 715 is a 2.9% increase over the 17 appropriation, excluding one-time free cash items that were appropriated in 17. And the schools' 2.9 million is 6.49% over the FY17 request.
So if you follow the next column over, the preliminary allocation of shortfall is, that's the dollar amount that we're asking people to trim from their
Pass this
current
along.
FY18 non-contingent submission.
So the two numbers, the 20% and the 80%, that Michael and Amy have on the screen are their proposal to the board, but the warrant committee does have to come up with its own proposal. But
Correct.
this is a methodology for us to consider for how to divide up the 1.5 shortfall. How are you going to decide, whatever the number is, right now it's $312,000 for the non-school side, how are you going to decide how to split up the shortfall on the non-school side?
So we've done that. We've met with, obviously, if you look at the town side, some of the smaller departments, I mean, if we asked them to give a portion, they would be, they wouldn't have any general expenses, right? So what we did was we looked at our 4 or 5 major carriers on that side, both public safety entities, Public Works Department, cemeteries, libraries, parks, and we asked them to give a percentage of that back to the FY18 non-contingent.
So would you ask them for an even percentage across the board? I'm a little bit confused because...
Hey, Maggie,
What?
if you want to get recognized, just... Do you have a question, Maggie?
Yes. I'm somewhat confused now, all of these other departments, because I did watch a meeting
Yeah.
last night, it was great. But I was somewhat confused because you did mention all of the larger departments and various people in the school department on the budgets that you were going to cut. So is it across the board, or is it percentage-wise, whereas, let's say, the school department spiked 30%? And shouldn't they be paying a higher percentage of the budget shortfall? I did go to the Mass Administration Finance website, and I noticed that fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18, the schools are getting 15.51%. Now, the regular unrestricted general government local aid is getting 3.9% over last year. So it just doesn't seem balanced if you're not taking more from perhaps the school department than the general funds. Now, I'm speaking in a lay person's term because I don't understand all of this. I'm just trying to make some type of sense.
I'm not 100% sure we're following your question, but the proposed allocation of the cut is 80-20, right? So that's strictly based upon how much above 17 the total non-contingent request is and how much of that relates to schools. That's the methodology we're using. Not everybody agrees with that methodology. As far as the cherry sheets go, and I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, we don't say this much is Chapter 70 and that's all the school gets. We've never divvied the revenue up that way. We just take total revenue. We don't say, well, the Chapter 70 went up 170, so that all goes to the school, and the unrestricted local aid went up 400, so that all goes to the town. We don't do it that way, and we don't do it that way with the assessments either. We take total revenue total budget requests, and then we try to figure out the shortfall, what's a reasonable, fair, and equitable way to spread that out. And the methodology we came up with, if you are 80% or 20% of the overage over the prior fiscal balanced budget, then it would seem fair and equitable to take 80 or 20% of the cut we're looking to do. That is
Everyone clear on
not.
that?
Yes. See?
Is anybody not clear on how they divided that up? Maggie? Yeah.
The unrestricted, though, if you go to the unrestricted general government local aid, as far as the mass admin financial website, they do cite the Milton Chapter 70 schools, and they give you the differences
Right.
as far as the fiscal year and the percentages. So would you mind explaining why you don't like to look at it this way as opposed to the way you're speaking about?
So I'm not sure I'm not
Hey, Maggie,
following.
let me just try to reinterpret what you
Okay.
said. It sounds like you're saying we're getting more Chapter 90 reimbursement.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 70. We're getting more Chapter 70 reimbursement next year than we have in the past in comparison to the unrestricted aid. And then you said, why wouldn't the schools take a bigger cut? But I think probably what you meant to say was, why wouldn't the schools take a smaller cut?
Okay.
Because the funding that you're tying to the schools is going up over last year more than the funding that you're tying not to the schools.
Right.
Okay. And the answer is that's just not the way
It's
to
not
do it.
how we do it, and if you're going to do that, then you should look at the assessments the same way, and I don't think that's fair either.
Okay.
So every dollar of revenue that we could see going forward would be divvied up that way as well, right? If we got, let's say we got $1 million overnight, right? 800,000 of that would go back towards the school's budget, and 200,000 would go back towards the town's budget. Just, that allocation is just what we started our methodology with, and that's where we're basing our cuts. And then when you get into the town side, obviously there's more departments, so you have to divvy that up, and we took some percentages for the public safety, public works, cemeteries, and library, and cut those accordingly.
I was hoping you were going to be able to share those percentages with us tonight, because we're getting to the point where we
Yep.
need to start doing
Yeah.
something with the non-contingent budget. We're going to have to re-vote all those budgets pretty soon, in a couple of weeks. So is there a point at
We
which
do,
you're
I
going to...
have a sheet. We
Okay.
didn't break it out by percentage, though, did we?
So,
In other words, we're asking the police department to cut their FY18 non-contingent request, $92,349,
which is,
which is 1.32% of what they submitted. I didn't break down the percentages of the 93,000 over the 312.
Yeah.
I have a list of them. I can read through them.
So it seems like you probably went through and evaluated the budgets on a budget-by-budget basis and looked where you could find cuts, whereas what I've done basically is just
So-
seen what a proportion of the total budget each department is and then allocated a straight line cut just for somewhere to start. So, okay. It would be great to see your methodology if you want that to inform our decision.
Yeah.
yeah, so we started out the way you did it, and it resulted in things like, I don't have the exact numbers, but Safe Central Business, it completely wiped out my general expense and then ate into
Right.
my labor. I just can't do it, so we didn't, once we started meeting with department heads after we went through the budgets and said this,
Town clerk, same problem.
Department,
There's,
yeah,
you can only
so-
cut so much in the town clerk, but if
we
I don't know...
did it on the big
Right,
departments.
but if I don't know where you
Yep.
really prefer that cut to come from, I don't know how to
Right.
recommend we
Well,
make
because
those
we
cuts.
haven't
Okay.
finished identifying, and we have our numbers. Michael has met
Right.
with everybody several times,
Okay.
but we're still fine tuning it.
And through those conversations, I think there are some impact statements that people may or may not want to voice at this time, what that cut means to their department as
Okay.
we've presented it to them. But, yeah, we have a spreadsheet that we can distribute along with the
Okay.
packet tonight that shows where we, on February 1st, have identified on the town side a percentage and actual dollar amount that we've spoken to the department head about.
Well, I think the library shared with you a draft impact statement based on the number that they most recently
Yes.
had.
Yep.
Do you have any other impact statements from any of the other departments? I know the schools are here, but what about public safety and the other departments?
Yeah, very roughly. Obviously, Chief King, we want to congratulate him on the birth of his son, but he's kind of been, I've been getting him remotely, but his statement to me today was that that $93,000 cut would impact some of the services that they provide on a community level. Obviously, if he has to take some of that money from overtime, then it puts a burden on covering shifts when officers might not be able to make their shift. But overall, it's just a level of service. Maybe, I don't know if we get the enforcement piece in the business districts for the parking violations or something to that effect. Chief Grant from the fire department talked about not being able to buy small equipment this year. I know the Public Works Department talked about possibly cutting back on some of the weekend services they provide in the business districts, whether it's emptying litter baskets or stuff like that. But obviously, Will's impact statement, I think I have it with me here.
I have it, if you don't.
Yeah. Talks about I believe the number was the $28,000 cut to his FY18 non-contingent appropriation would translate to having to close the library on Saturdays in the summer.
Wednesday evening.
Yeah, closing Wednesday nights early, 5:30 to 8, because they'd have to eliminate a part-time library assistant.
All right, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if they close Saturdays in the summer, they're also closed Sundays in the summer, so that means they're not open on the weekends.
It doesn't say
That's
that.
correct.
That's correct.
Ridiculous.
Do you have a question?
I do. Same use of free cash? Any change from a few weeks ago?
Zero use of free cash.
And just to be on the record, last couple of years, we've used several $100,000 for operating for free cash.
Not last
recently.
year, the year
Year
before.
before,
We used
okay.
about 510,000 maybe to balance fiscal 16.
Got it. Last year, we had a one-time stuff.
But,
Yeah.
right, and when we did it in 16, it was a 2-year plan. We were planning on pursuing an override in 17. And then the stormwater adoption for enterprise was approved. Therefore, we were able to balance the budget and decided not to go forward with an override at that time.
And we need to, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, different question. Go ahead if you have.
I was just going to say, to add on to the free cash comment, the Department of Revenue recommends that you have around 3% of your budget in free cash each year. They consider that to be a healthy scenario. And you are not supposed to budget any of your free cash for use for operating expenses. It's for use for one-time items only. So I understand that, unlike last year where we ended up saying, okay, well, we can do the non-contingent budget with no cuts. This year, we're going to have to make cuts. And I think that it's probably attractive to go looking at the free cash for a way to reduce the impact of the cuts. But that's a Band-Aid that I would be really hesitant to sign on to myself because it would violate that recommendation from the Department of Revenue. And also, it would potentially just put off for one more year this pain that we've been putting off year after year after year. Something that we have to talk about when we talk about free cash anyway, though. But yes, point taken.
So we'll have that conversation. I don't know if I agree with you. Second question, I assume the school committee doesn't agree with your allocation, or you haven't had that conversation yet?
We have had that conversation.
That would be correct.
Yeah, all right, got it. I just,
Leroy says that's correct. Chairman Walker does. So do you have any other impact statements that you want to share before we ask the school committee to come up and weigh in?
No, I think that's it.
So what I'm imagining is, we'll ask the audience for some reaction to what you just presented, and then we'll circle back to talk about the budgets.
Sure.
So what'd you say, Katie? You okay with that?
Yeah, I just have one comment.
Go ahead.
After you poll the audience for their reaction, if you give Mr. Dennehy
Sure.
a chance to perhaps
He has to come back anyway.
comment. I know, but to perhaps have one
Sure.
final comment on that.
Yeah, there's no, yes, Mr. Dennehy will be asked his opinion many times, but there's no final comment tonight. We're not voting on the budget tonight, for
No, I
sure.
understand
And
that.
this is an evolving process, and it's a tough conversation because we have to take out $1.5 million from the budget, obviously. But, all right, thank you both, and we'll call you back up in a little bit. Chairman Conlon, was there anything that you wanted to contribute to the conversation tonight?
Not at this time.
Just hanging out? Okay. So, Chairman Walker, do you want to come up, and does anybody from the administration want to come up?
Yes.
The schools?
Superintendent Gormley and Dr. Pavlicek join me.
Putting on the other side of you.
Good evening.
Evening.
We have some very specific information we'd like to give you. We're actually going to talk about some cuts that we just voted less than an hour ago. They total 18.4 FTEs, and the savings that would come from those cuts is approximately $762,400. I know that you will, but I'd like for you to listen carefully to both the cuts that have been proposed and voted by the school committee, proposed by the superintendent, voted by the school committee, and the impacts. And we have a handout for all of you that documents both the cuts and the impacts. Chairman McLean asked whether the schools were in support of the allocation, and by extension, I would say, or the recommendation. We've been through, I've been involved in 12 budget cycles on behalf of the town of Milton. Dr. Pavlicek, at least 18. Superintendent Gormley, many more. We won't say exactly how many. There were some things that were different about this year's process. Some of that we expected, some of that we didn't. What we expected was this was the first budget that was to be prepared by the strong town administrator. The statute requires that the town administrator present a balanced budget to the selectmen. What I expected also was that we would continue some of what I think are the best practices of the budget process, specifically that in previous budget processes, either the Warrant Committee Chair and the Assistant Superintendent for Business, along with the what was then the weak town administrator and the town accountant, Ms. Dexter. And as Ms. Bagley-Jones corrected me, that's a weak position, not a weak person. Anne Marie was a very strong administrator. But those four individuals were involved in the construction of the revenue and expenses spreadsheet. That's where the budget process starts. You make your projections about revenue. You're very conservative in making those recommendations. You've had the budgets hopefully a month or two in advance of that. They're technically due by, preliminary budgets are due by December 1st. So you start that process by documenting what you think the expenses are. This year, unfortunately, Dr. Pavlicek was not included in that process, nor was, as I understand it, the chair of the Warrant Committee. I think what we expect with regard to the new strong town administrator is certainly leadership, is certainly that at the end of the day, that person makes the final decisions about what budget he or she wants to present to the selectmen. There's no question about that. But I think inclusiveness and inclusion is a good part of the process. So you heard about some of the surprises that we experienced during the process. We did acknowledge when we first met with the town administrator and Ms. Dexter on January 3rd that we thought the revenue projection on local aid was conservative. It projected a $200 decrease from what it was last year. We said, both Dr. Pavlicek and I said we thought that was conservative. They acknowledged that it was conservative. So we thought it was extremely good news when, as you saw, local aid increased over that amount, that projected amount, by $461,000. We were quite surprised to hear that the school's $1.2 million share of the cut that we saw in the budget spreadsheet that we saw on January 3rd was unchanged when we met again on January 26th. What we had hoped would be part of that process was the same sort of give and take. We offered some ideas about perhaps looking at the revenue side of the spreadsheet and looking to see whether we could be a little less conservative. We offered a few suggestions there. We offered some suggestions about savings in other areas. But, and I want to be clear that there was always the willingness to meet and talk, but what we heard in the 3 meetings and 1 conference call that we had was your share is your share, and we don't really see any way to alter that. So here's where we are. Where we are is we have a budget proposal that's been put forward to you that requires the schools to eliminate 22 positions and no other town department to take any layoffs. So that's the proposal.
You're equating the 1.2 million cut to 22 positions?
Right, it's roughly $58,000 per position.
Okay.
You can understand why each school committee member sitting behind me, as well as myself representing him as the chair, cannot support that recommendation. We also have the responsibility when we identify cuts, because we expect to talk about them publicly, which we should do and which the viewing public is entitled to, we have to notify those individuals. So we decided that we could certainly assume that if the proposed cut is 1.2 million, that under no circumstances would we end up with a cut that was less than $750,000. Thus, tonight we have voted approval of $760,000 in personnel cuts. But I had hoped that we could come to you along with the town administrator and say, we went through this process, there was some give and take, and we're in support of the recommendation. Unfortunately, we can't. So now we will rely on the Warrant Committee and the Selectmen to look at this proposal and hopefully understand why the school committee cannot support it, and frankly, I would think the town cannot support it. But let's move to the specifics. We're going to have
Can I ask a question
Yep.
before you do that? Both you and Dr. Pavlicek have been on this warrant committee before.
We
I don't
have.
think that you have. No,
I felt like I was.
She's
And
honorary
I
member.
know that you've crossed this bridge before where you had to allocate a percentage of the budget to the school department and a percentage of the budget to the non-school departments. Do you have advice on how that methodology gets created?
Yes, and I think if I look at the way that it was calculated, I think the concern is not so much with the allocation as it is with the outcome. That when I heard on January 3rd that our cut was 1.2 million, I said, okay, I get it. Revenue expectations or estimates are very conservative, and I assumed that during that process, as in every other process I've been involved in, that working with the Warrant Committee Chair and the Town Administrator and our Assistant Superintendent for Business and the Town Accountant, that comes down, that figure comes down because revenue, new revenue comes in, and there are other tough decisions that have to be made. So I don't want to set up a dynamic where it's us against the other departments, but I think I would say again that a scenario where a single part of the town that delivers a very valuable service is taking, never mind the 80-20, is taking 22 position eliminations and no other department is not one that I think is consistent with what we expect in terms of town services. That's going to create, as you'll hear some of, that's going to create devastation in the schools. It's going to cause us to backslide on the progress that we've made in terms of the achievement gap. It's going to cause us to shrink the range of programs that we're offering at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. It's going to raise class sizes. And I think that is just something that we'll have to figure out how to address. Right. And I understand that means we might have to make some tough decisions. I had hoped that some of those tough decisions could have been made before we got here, but here we are.
Okay. At the end of the day, we're going to need to do some math and come up with an allocation. And whether it's 80-20 or it's 78-22 or whatever, we need to come up with some numbers and some way to figure out what percentage of the cut goes to the schools and what percentage of the cut goes to the rest of the town.
Right.
And I understand that everybody hoped that the cut would come down, but the numbers really didn't change. Your cut
Right.
stayed the same.
So I think the best way to do that is the way that you're going to do it, which is to talk to each town, each department about their budget, make an assessment of what you think the have-to-haves and like-to-haves are, even in a non-contingent budget, or where you can distribute the pain somewhat more equally than I think we have at present, and you'll have to make a judgment. And I don't think it's going to be straight percentages. I think it's going to be looking at the detail and deciding which of those cuts are most painful and less painful. They're all painful.
Before Superintendent Gormley jumps in with the pain, did you want to add anything to that discussion, Dr. Pavlicek? About the methodology?
At the moment, I think the big picture is we have $1.5 million problem as a town.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no simple way to say, well, we're just going to pick this formula and allocate it that way. We've got a variety of different things we have to look at. Some of them are the relative merits of various different cuts. Some of them will be to continue to work with our legislators to look at, for instance, levels of state support in the budget. The governor's budget, although it is up from last year, is fairly conservative on some things like Chapter 70, which was 2.5 times this last year. It was basically $50 a head last year. It's $20 a head this year. So there is some play in some of the numbers still. So it's not just, we're not going to just cut our way to this. We've got a variety of different things to do in a while to do it. Only 6 weeks, but it's still till you go to press anyway. There will be some movement in here, but I think it's anytime you have a situation like this, just to reiterate what Chairman Walker said, we don't want to make this into some sort of us versus them competition. This is a large problem that the town has to look at as a large problem for the town and figure out as a town what's the best way we can address this. That's fairest to all concerned. And you could say, well, the schools are 62% of the total budget, so they should only take 62. We can play all sorts of numerical games here, but that's always just a starting point. What it really comes down to is whatever point you start at, you look at the individual budgets and say, yeah, but that doesn't work. As we've seen tonight, in the central business office, taking their share of it would do harm to a little department that can't take that kind of harm. Right. So there are all it's always going to work down to a value judgment. It's a difficult thing for the Warrant Committee to do. We get it, been here, but it's got to come. It's never as simple as a formula. It's always got to be really looked at in terms of the actual impact at the different levels and what those impacts are going to cause down the line to the town as a whole.
Thank you.
And I can say with complete confidence that we trust your judgment.
Thank you.
Question.
Superintendent Gormley?
Let me pass these around so you
Okay.
have something to look at just a
Thanks.
second. Mary. Here's for you and Mary.
Thanks.
Take those. Yeah, I have two sheets for you. One is just numbers, and the second one is the impacts of those numbers.
Give me half
So-
of them, Lauren.
So the second one, if you can slide that around.
Half the other way. Send half the other way.
Oh, okay.
Glenn, we have somebody from the Milton Times in the back row, and she had asked for copies of things, so if you have an
Copies.
extra, great.
You get two. So should I begin?
I'm sorry, yes.
So good evening.
Good evening.
So the charge to the leadership team was to look at the Milton Public Schools and make $762,400 in cuts and reductions. And for the viewing audience and the people new to the process, people will say to us, well, this list is different than, past lists. Well, my reply is the 4,000 children are different. The needs of the district are different. The unfunded mandates are different. And a group of children graduated and a new group of children arrived, and children arrive, unlike a lot of communities, children arrive in the Milton Public Schools literally every day, multiple children every week. And so we sit down with the leadership team, charged by the school committee, and every Tuesday we meet with the finance subcommittee. And I think it's important briefly to understand this, how this list, how these names are identified. And then we go to finance subcommittee, and often they'll have comments, and I'll go back to the principals and the leadership team, and we've gone back and forth. And then you should know that because this is televised and the school committee meeting was televised, that we brought together, Monday, the principals saw these individual people, staff members, and told them that they were on this list. Because yesterday I had full staff meetings explaining this process to them. There was the largest response, I don't know if this is good for you or bad, of staff that has ever come to these meetings. And because I don't want them to hear tomorrow morning, I watched the TV and your position's being eliminated. And so we explained to them what an override is. We explained to them the residential base in this town. We tell them that this town is its public schools, and we give them the history of successful overrides. But what happens is those people, many of them who are on this list, will start today and look for other positions because of the uncertainty. And as I say to them, it impacts these people, it impacts the students, it impacts the department, because when you're eliminated, the rest of us, our class size is going to go up, and eliminates whole schools. So I think it's important for people to understand how we've identified these staff members. The first elimination and cut would be an instructional technology teacher. You all read how MCAS is now PARC, and it's going to be a next generation MCAS, and your children in this community gives the test online, as all the communities have been charged to eventually give the test online. We have one technology teacher who moves in the 4 elementary schools with 2,000 children, teaching the teachers, teaching the children, teaching classes, doing the professional development. So that's a 1.0 elimination, would greatly diminish our capacity to support students in the 21st century skills and support them in taking the PARC. So that's a 1.0 elimination, and that's the only teacher for the 4 elementary schools. The next cut reduction at the elementary level is a 1.3 FTE. Now, I often say that some warrant committee members, residents, school committee members could give this presentation equal, I hope not better than me, but equal to what I do. And so huge in the Milton Public Schools we call it a jewel, is the music and art program. And we all understand that. And so it's, the whole culture is this feeder program. And as I say publicly, you're really not 17 and pick up the violin. These programs start when children are in elementary school. And so we've had 30-minute periods of art, music, and physical education. So in your school building project, you built art and music rooms and gyms. And so you bring the children to the gym, and then 30 minutes by the time you pick them up isn't really a quality lesson. And we have a group of advocates, parents in this community who've done the comparative research. I sent you all those answers that I told you I'd send you the last time. I could send you this. So we moved, and this has been an issue for years, to these classes being 45 minutes. And the dual benefit of that over the years, at the middle and high, teachers get to meet together to plan, which drives student achievement. At the elementary school, there is no time. You go to school, you're on your feet, you have your lunch and your contractual time, but you all don't meet at the same time. This provided once a week for all the grade 3 teachers in a school to meet all the grade level teachers in each of the elementary schools. So this increase in art, music, and PE to 45 minutes, from 30 to 45, an extra 15 minutes, had unbelievable impact on student achievement, teacher instruction. We're going to go back to the 30 minutes, and that's the elimination of a 1.3 teachers divided between art and music. The next elementary cut is a 0.2 French immersion 5th grade teacher. For those of you who children have been in French immersion, really driven by the request and almost the demand of parents, at the 5th grade, the students become integrated, the English and the French children, almost like a beginning 6th grade middle school model. I'd say that what we're going to do is have to reorganize across the district, and that's a 0.2 cut. To me, this shows you the level we went to, looking at every position in the Milton Public Schools to identify this 0.2 cut, which will have some scheduling implications. The next reduction is a 1.0, and that, and the next one, as you understand, special education positions are, to us, bills. We have no choice. But the SPED director serves on our leadership team, and she put up this 1.0 reduction, and member Craighead tonight at the meeting prior to this reminded the viewing public, based on the children that we know now, with nobody moving in, the tentative enrollment would allow us to not eliminate this 3rd grade, but not have to add this co-taught grade 3. I went over this with the Warrant Committee, the public, the parents in the school district understand it. These co-taught classrooms keep children in the Milton Public Schools. 90% of these children would be out-of-district placements. That would be huge tuitions and transportation. So again, that's one of 2 special ed cuts on this list. The second one is we have a program at the Glover School that we refer to as the STEP program. These are children who have emotional issues. It's an extraordinary program. These children are included in the regular classroom. They're given adjustment counselor and all sorts of services. They work back into the regular classroom. That classroom has a special ed teacher, a regular ed teacher, and some of these ed plans require these children have paraprofessionals with them, and they get adjustment counselor help each day. What we're going to do is keep the teacher but eliminate one of the 2 teachers in that STEP program. Those are the only 2 special ed cuts. Again, to us, special ed is almost beyond our control. The next elementary cut will be the elimination of band, strings, and ACE. So at the elementary school, I'm preaching to the converted here. Everyone understands you're not 17 years old and pick up a violin. And this band and strings and ACE, children identified, and Member Bagley-Jones gave a great addition to this tonight. ACE used to be in the 4th and 5th grade, so over the years, now it's just 5th grade. So children who create a portfolio, it's during their lunchtime, they're taught together in an ACE enrichment. It's equal to those children who sign up for band and take lessons, or those children who start in strings. I would tell you, we used to have elementary chorus, and we eliminated that over the years. We see the impact on chorus at the middle school of not having chorus at the elementary. So the jewel of your school district and your town is this music program. And so these feeder programs are really integral, and the culmination of them, as I said, these children just don't win awards and travel up and down the seacoast when they're at the high school. They go into this for their profession. And so, but again, when we look at $762,000 in cuts, elimination of band, strings, and ACE at the elementary school. We have explained that over the years in the Milton Public Schools, we would put a new program in one grade at a time. So if Chuck's child was in the second grade and we're putting in the reading program, Chuck's child doesn't get the new reading program because it's 1 year behind. What that advancement budget enabled us to do in science at the middle school was to buy 3 years of science curriculum. So we were able to really target that science at the elementary school. And again, it was one of our achievement gap areas. And as an offshoot of this, in the area of STEM and I-STEM, we created these electives. So my goal is for every child who lives in Milton to go to the Milton Public Schools. I don't want anyone to leave for a better academic. I say I can't give you a triple eagle, I can't give you a single-sex education, but our enrollment shows that children are coming to the Milton Public Schools. Middle school, for those teachers at the table, is a time to explore, a time for all those electives and the middle school child. And I know from parents' comments that these STEM and I-STEM classes, they want their children to have enrichment in science and math. They understand the correlation to that, elective that's going to support their science and math class. In looking at these cuts, the middle school principal put forward the 1.0 elimination of a STEM I-STEM. This would completely eliminate the STEM elective currently available to 6th grade students. Would also completely eliminate 7th grade advanced science I-STEM, intensive studies in science, technology, and engineering and math. Class sizes and all the other electives would go up to 30. So again, children go to their English, math, science, and social studies, and then they take electives. If you eliminate electives, everyone understands you're the math people. Those children are going to drive enrollment. Besides eliminating those unbelievable electives, we're driving enrollment up in the other electives at the middle school. The next cut will be a 0.6 cut, and this reduction is going to take 3 teachers, a music teacher, a computer teacher, and an art teacher, and reduce them to 0.8, and eliminate a 0.2 elective in chorus, a 0.2 elective in computer, and a 0.2 elective in art. And so the hurt in this, the impact of this is that these teachers are going to leave. So they're qualified, they're gifted, they work in the Milton Public Schools. They're going to go somewhere to be a 1.0. They're not going to stay here for the 0.8. And then when you hire somebody 0.8 or 0.5 in our world, you usually hire them next Labor Day when they're not employed anywhere else. So this is difficult. This would reduce art and music offerings and eliminate that I-STEM computer class and one general computer offering. Class sizes and all of the electives would be driven, the principal rights to 30 or more students would have to be redistributed, thank you. It's extremely difficult to recruit, as she's writing, and retain high-quality people for 0.8 positions when they've had a 1.0. That's a 0.6 reduction. Math investigations and I-STEM at the middle school is a reduction of 1.0. This would completely eliminate 8 sections, the class meets every other day, of math investigations. Math investigations is a math support class that has been consistently correlated with high growth in mathematics and thus is necessary to address the achievement gap. You have a middle school principal who is a data who analyzes the data equal to anyone in the district. And again, this isn't a cut that anybody or a reduction wants to put forward. She knows that this math support class, again, we might be in it, and she watches our data, and then we move out of the class, and other children move into the class. This has driven student achievement. This would completely eliminate the 8th grade advanced math I-STEM. The students were working to keep all students in the Milton Public Schools. Class size and all of our electives would increase to as much as 30 or more as students would be redistributed. At the high school, we're going to eliminate a 1.0 math teacher if we have to if we have to be cut by $762,000. This would eliminate math support and MCAS prep classes. These courses not only support MCAS students, which the state, again, in my tenure, when MCAS began, the state would give you money for these support classes. They would identify students who failed at the middle school. They don't give you those funds anymore, but they expect everyone to pass MCAS to graduate. So we have implemented these classes, and that's why you have the rate you have of students passing MCAS at Milton High School and graduating, and the state no longer gives us that money. But it also supports special education students in Course 3, which is the level of math. So there'd be a 1.0 elimination of a math teacher. At the high school level, we would reduce a social studies teacher to 0.5. You understand what that means? The 1.0 teacher would probably apply and move elsewhere. We'd post a 0.5 position, and the impact on the school district would be to eliminate 2 sections each of law and government and contemporary issues, forcing class sizes higher in other electives, and also eliminating those electives. An English teacher, a 0.5 elimination of an English teacher at Milton High. This would eliminate some English support sections, creative writing, and freshman seminar, again, forcing the electives in the other areas to have higher class size. In the fine arts area, the elimination of a 0.5 teacher. This would eliminate 1 class of child study. As you remember from past years, high school students who want to go into education, like students who want to go into music, or students who want to go into business. We have children who, preschoolers who go to the high school. For 3 days, students sign up for this elective. 2 days, they're taught about early child development and how to plan lessons, and they teach with the teacher. It's fabulously successful. We would eliminate 1 class of that child study, and we would also reduce the band and choral director positions, limiting student access to these very popular electives. If you turn the page. A 0.6 elimination of a business teacher. We would eliminate personal finance, computer, and technology elective, forcing class sizes in the remaining electives. Again, these principals and department heads have, again, this list, and these, I don't like to refer to it as a list. These cuts and reductions, we've gone back and forth with the school committee, the finance subcommittee, and the principals, and they actually understand now on February 1st what the impact would be and what would be eliminated. Eliminating building subs, 6.0 building subs would be eliminated. What we've worked on over the years is when teachers go out of maternity, paternity, workman's comp issues, and teachers have to be out of school, substitutes get $80 a day. And if you bring in a substitute, they start work the next day. And so what we've done in each building, a substitute gets $80 a day. And Dr. Pavlicek, these building subs get 128. What we do is assign 1 to a building. They actually work almost every day of the year because they go from one maternity leave to another maternity. We've got them mapped out for the whole year. And then if an issue comes up and somebody's sick, we might move one of these building subs. But these people, when we tell them that they have to see Assistant Superintendent Sheehan, or they know how to access a technology director, they know the workings of the school. This is huge because students don't miss a day. If you have a sub in there, it's going to take a while for us to make sure the sub has the qualifications, for the children and the parents to get oriented to the sub, for the sub to, we have to know that the sub can master the curriculum. These building subs have really assured for the instruction during some of these leaves that we have when we have 350 teachers. We would eliminate those positions. And the last position on this list, in no order of, again, district-wide, in the area of special education. You were very receptive, you understood. We had 100 children out of district. With the drive from this community and the school building project, we now have under 50 children in out-of-district placements. The parents should all be here saying, I want my child in the district. I don't want my child on a bus for up to 2 hours a day. And these parents and guardians are smart. They go to out-of-district placements, they go to the Milton Public Schools, and they're choosing to keep their children in these specialized programs. What this inclusion specialist has done, and I said to the teachers, call your relatives and friends, and I charge you to. We have 1 inclusion specialist for the whole district. This person, I said to the school committee, knows the district as well as the 3 of us, and they move the district. So a child's in special they'll go and observe the regular ed and the special ed teacher. They'll give feedback to the teacher how this child might better succeed if you change your teaching techniques. New children come into the district, the inclusion specialists work with the regular ed teacher, the special ed teacher working on their ed plans so that days and weeks aren't missed for the child. The inclusion specialist has been an unbelievable contribution to the philosophy of inclusion in the Milton Public Schools and the success, as I say, the number of children out of district is reduced because these parents understand and they are involved and they're driving that program, and they are working collaboratively with us. And they come to the Milton Public Schools and they observe these programs, just like they go out to private special ed programs. So that would be another reduction. As I said to the teachers yesterday, at the elementary level, I showed you there are assistant principals. There are no other positions. For art, music, library, and gym, we're meeting the teacher's contract. There are no extra. We're bringing this right back to meeting the contract. And at the middle school, you all understand the team approach. When we tried to eliminate one history teacher, we were getting feedback from the staff, from parents, from the principal, so the team approach. And at the high school, you have a high school that I've explained to you the success of the instruction, and these will impact offerings for students, achievement, and the quality of the program. So that is the proposal that the Finance Subcommittee, the leadership team, worked on, and the school committee voted tonight and approved.
Superintendent Gormley, I just want to say I don't want to do this. I'd really like to go back in time and pass the advancement override that we were talking about last year. But many people in town, some of them in this room, said that that was impossible without a burning platform. Now I hope we have a burning platform. And these cuts aren't going to do it. This is going to have to come up to $1 million at least, maybe 1.3. Who knows? I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how this committee is going to allocate cuts, but I doubt that we're going to come up with the balance of these cuts on the town side. Just a gut check right here. I did some back of the napkin math, and I don't see where the numbers are coming from on the town side. So this is not the worst case scenario, I don't think, for the schools. We have a lot more work to do, but this is bad. And I wish that we weren't in this position.
And it's important to know that we told the teachers, and having been involved with this, the school committee has scheduled meetings with parents to go out to every school, and in my experience, perhaps they'll hear feedback on one position, and we'll agonize about, but again, the people who do the work and the school committee who's responsible for the district, not one of these positions came readily to any cut reduction list.
Well, now that there are some positions out there, part of the comments that you were saying is that some of these people are going to start looking for other jobs.
Today.
If this committee endorses a contingent budget and town meeting votes to support a contingent budget, and the Board of Selectmen vote to put an override out to vote in June, I think, at the earliest, we'll know approximately in June whether or not we're going to have the money for a contingent budget and to save these positions and maybe add a few more. Is that too late at that point
I have
to
to tell
save
you-
some of that industry,
So what I said yesterday, I know, and if you don't mind, so what I said yesterday to the teachers is that this town values its public schools, to the people in the audience. And I said, but keep in mind, it's very hard. I said to them, go back to your own towns and think about raising your taxes. I said, but in this town, we know the originator of the formula said, if you don't have commercial base, you don't want smokestacks in Milton, I explained to them, it's on the back of the taxpayers. I said, and this is really hard, this doesn't come easily. I said, but the town values its public schools, it has a history of overrides, and then I explained that we got 90 cents on the dollar, how much, Glenn, 1.8? For the buildings?
154.
for the school building. I said, so in a lot of districts, they're looking at operational as opposed to building overrides and an $8 million donation from the Copelands. I said, so in the buildings, there's a lot of school districts after where you're going to do an operational, or you're going to do that second school or that third school. So I explained to them that as a community, we've been extraordinarily fortunate with 90 cents on the dollar, every classroom built to new. I said, and this town has a history of supporting, again, the schools and all of the services in the override. I couldn't promise them, I said, but that's my experience. I said, and they value their public schools, but I explained the process to them. Member Varela had us explain to them what an override is, because we find parents with young children saying, what is a 2.5 override? So when we go out, the chairperson and Chairman Varela had us add a section to our presentation explaining what an override is, because many parents have asked us, they don't understand.
To fine tune my question a little bit, do you think some of these people will have new jobs by June?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we've already done damage to the town.
Yes.
Betty had a question.
And thus, so that our effort here was to balance, do we go out and notify 22 people now, or do we notify 18.4 now? Because my view is, and if you put yourself in their position, there's a chance I could not have a job. I won't know for sure until sometime in June, by which time the people who are out there competing for jobs have gotten those jobs. So should I look for a job now, or should I wait till June? I should look for a job now.
Yep. Sorry, Betty.
That's okay. Mary, when you presented the school committee budget about a month ago, you talked about enrollment, and that enrollment's been increasing and growing, and particularly in the nursery school, preschool, and kindergarten, and that you were projecting that you might need another kindergarten teacher. Can you just talk a little bit about that detail in terms of the kindergarten number that you had expected for September, how many kids actually showed up, and what the next year looks like, and if in fact we were to have to hire another kindergarten teacher for next year's enrollment, how does that impact these cuts? Because you're going to have to put those children in front of a teacher.
Mr. Walker and Glenn, do you want to talk to that? All right, so let me start with the kindergarten. And there was a presentation at school committee from NESDEC, the enrollments. We'll send you that presentation. And you saw the Chronicle spot. The enrollment at the elementary schools, 75% of the classrooms are at the cap, at 25. We have free full-day kindergartens that should be 18 to 20 children. Ask any preschool person. They're all at 23 and one's at 24. They should have full-time aides. They have .8 aides. And so Glenn will explain that we built the schools for 15 kindergartens, 4 at 2 schools, right, Glenn?
14.
14. So for the last 2 years, we've had 16. And so the other night, we had kindergarten information night, and so we're watching those numbers daily. But I said to Glenn, should have all of these presentations had an asterisk, that what if the kindergartners show up and we need a 17th kindergarten? But we didn't do that. I said to Glenn, probably every one of these presentations should have had a big star at the bottom that said, and if 23 more children show up for kindergarten, we're going to have to create another kindergarten class.
So there was, I asked the same, that's a great question, Betty. And what the superintendent explained was that at the kindergarten information night, we had 150 more people this year than we had last year, 10. And there are certain break points which Dr. Pavlicek can tell us about, but right now we have 16. There's a possibility we could have a 17th. There's a possibility we could have an 18th. So the answer to your question is, because we would have to hire those people, we'd have to lay off 2 more people. That's the impact. We don't have any choice about, it's public school, so if the children are here, we have to deliver services.
And at this presentation where we know 150 more people showed because we give everybody an appointment, 11 people identified themselves to me as not yet living in the community, but moving to the community and coming to the kindergarten information night.
I had Maggie and then Jean.
I just have a couple of points. Do you, I don't know if you ever think about admin, do you also include them in your budget?
Oh, that's a
I
great
don't even know
question.
how many you have.
Great question. I added it yesterday and I added it earlier. First of all, over the years, we've looked at the custodial support staff, and we're down to, Glenn will tell you, the number of custodians compared to past years, the footage. And then what's happened when we cut a custodian, we have to pay overtime. The buildings have to be cleaned. So Glenn will give you historically the custodians and the number we're at. At administration, that's a very, and I explained to the teachers, that's a very sensitive note, and you're absolutely right. And so historically, and I should be writing this down if somebody writes it down, I want to show you over the years, even when we didn't have budget cuts and we had to add classroom teachers, at Milton High School, there was always an English, when all of these gentlemen's children went to Milton High, there was an English department head and a history department head. As an English major, there should be an English department head. But we combined them and saved an administrative position and made a humanities department head. Within the last X number of years, there should be a director of art and a director of music. You've never met anybody that could do, that's an expert in both of those. We combined it to a fine arts director.
And woodworking, and cooking, and auto shop.
So I can
We
give
oversee
you,
all that.
I can give you maybe over the years at this administration, the math director is K-12. K-12, you know, so so I will give you, and to share with everyone, how we have, there are no more administrators to cut.
I guess I'm.
Well, I could say
asking
there
you all-
always are.
So when you're trying to have a balanced budget, it's always going to be the teachers, you never think of admin, or
Well, I
maybe
have-
increasing fees to, even though I know your pet
Oh.
peeve as far as
I've
what
gone
the
as high as-
kids do
but you are
after school.
You are absolutely right about administrators. I felt sensitive about this. Administrative assistants, custodians, and administrators, I felt sensitive in front of the teachers presenting that, but they sat there and they know, they know there's one math director, K-12. They know that the fine arts director is responsible for 5 areas. Putting another administrator on that cut list would impact instruction and achievement, and we've done that over the years. I'll give you the list, so you know at least we've looked at that.
Thank you.
Jean?
But it's an excellent point.
I was just wondering, well, we spoke earlier about the sensitivity of the legislature to come to the aid of this, which will be a fiasco. I'm thinking right across the lines. And is that in fact a possibility? Are you familiar with ever them responding to such a debacle in the budgeting system, where the certain revenues go up and then other expenses destroy it? Has this happened before?
The legislature is more likely to respond in a global picture than to a particular community. And it has a lot to do historically with the balance of power. In certain years, the governor's proposal is, dead on arrival at a low point. It's going to be the legislature in the House that really decide the budget. There's a lot of politics involved there. I think it will be moving around. I mean, there will certainly be talk between now and the final budget for the state, but at the same time, there's not going to be $1 million more in state aid. It isn't going to happen. You're going to be talking in the,
What
if you're
kind of
lucky,
time frame are-
$200,000 range net of state aid.
And what kind of time frame?
And
If you
You'll know the House budget in another few weeks. The Senate budget, doesn't usually come out till April, May, but depending on who sits on Ways and Means, and you talk to them and you get an idea where it's coming out, you can sometimes know in advance. The actual budget isn't likely to be known until July, but generally by the time town meeting comes along, you have a decent idea of where it's going to play out. But it does take a while. But again, it's, in a $1.5 million scenario, you're nibbling at the edges, you know, if you get 100,000, you know, granted, you get 100,000 nails here and $100,000 there, you're good. But, you know, the state aid isn't gonna solve it for us, but we certainly have to encourage our legislators to look at some of the issues in state aid. They are looking at the Chapter 70, but that's not gonna be for this year. The Foundation
Yeah.
Budget Review Committee, you know, is at least a year off in addressing some of the problems with the Chapter 70 formula. So, I mean, it's gonna be a little bit of a, you know, of work. As I said, you know, there's some things we can do. As I said last year, the guaranteed increase in aid is $50 a student. This year, the governor's budget's only saying 20. That's a $120,000 difference right there, all right? Something. I mean, it's, you know, it's a couple teachers. It's, you know, it's a step in the right direction, but it's, you know, I
It's
don't
not
think.
enough.
It's not enough by itself.
Yeah, okay.
Mary Lou, did you have a question?
I'm just very concerned about the impact of these cuts. And I am thinking about how we actually got here and how can we avoid this for the future. I don't know, so I want to just ask you, I know 25% of our budget is for special ed, and we're sending 50 students out of the district and paying their transportation costs. Could we bring them back into the district and then, instead of putting that expense out, manage them well and more economically here and still preserve these positions? And what else can we do in the future to avoid this? Do we need to be less generous on future contracts, union contracts? What do we need to do to not face this again?
Well, first, Glenn, will you describe the SPED, and then I want to enter in?
The remaining 50 students that we have out of district are students that we would have a very hard time servicing in district. Some of them are actually in hospital settings, and things like this. I mean, we have some students with some rather severe needs. They're in, you know, $300,000 a year out of district settings. It'd be cheaper to send them to Harvard than it would be to send them out of district, but they need the services. They have some severe, not only educational needs, but in many cases medical needs and a variety of different things. There is only so far you can go with.
But we're not paying the medical needs, right? That's Mass Health is paying the medical needs.
Well,
A nursing aid or?
but when you're in a residential facility, they may be supplying the nursing and medical needs, but we're still paying $300,000 a year for that child to be living there 365 days a year. It is, you know, probably it would take an awful lot to bring more of these students back in. We were able to bring the first half, the 50, back in from out of district because we now had space for classrooms. We could have a class for children on the autism spectrum that had 6 kids in it and 6 aides and bring them back and do that. But there's a limitation at some point where it just becomes very difficult. We have some, you know, high school age students who are, may have some legal troubles that might otherwise say you don't want them in the high school and you have to have an out-of-district placement for them. There are things that happen to kids, and trying to bring some of the more difficult cases in probably is never going to be reasonable. As for wage increases, the other part of your question, so forth, the teachers have a 222 agreement for 3 years. One of the things we've looked at historically is, you know, who do we compete against, you know? Who are our competing communities for good teachers? And if you look at, they all have these salary scales where after each year you go up a step and so forth. And basically our step 1 teachers are competitive with the step 1 teachers in our neighborhoods. Our step 10 teachers are paid a little better because we want to retain them. If we've had them for 10 years and we have some good people, we want to keep them. And basically, to get from A to B in 10 years, those steps, you know, we spend roughly a little over 2%, 2.25% a year on steps, just in the budget, because, well, if you got to get from here to there, there's no other way to do it. So that's sort of a base cost too. But that's a factor of the competition we have with, you know, trying to attract and retain good teachers. So it's difficult. I mean, the issue is, we're an 80% personnel budget. I mean, it's what we do. We teach kids. We are people heavy, and so cuts hit people very quickly, because there's, I can't turn off the heat, There's only so many things you can do outside of the realm of people. So in our world, it really does, it's more apparent than it might be in a department that's 50% personnel and 50% non-personnel. The reductions here just hit you harder and hit you more,
And to
right between the eyes.
Is it McGavie? Point, over the years, you asked, how can you not get here again? So in my world, every time we save $60,000, it's a teacher. So over the years, to the point, we've creeped up in these fees. So you pay for transportation, you pay to be on an athletic team. And I sat back, to your point, and you're new on this, and just like you, I said, well, I guess $25 for every student. And then it creeped up and it creeped up. And we also, I don't know other superintendents who, as I say, we have a relationship with the Milton Foundation for Education and these PTOs. When we meet people, they don't do fundraising like the Milton Public Schools do. And these organizations don't want to assume the taxpayer's responsibility. They don't want to buy computers that should be bought by the taxpayer. They want to enrich the experience, but we work with them. So we try as hard as we possibly can. And in this world of special education, to Glenn's point, we meet every single week. We want the children in the district, but some of their needs are beyond what the public schools can provide.
But on your last point, though, how do we stop from being here? That's a lovely discussion for the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen to talk, and all concerned to talk about the issues of what constitutes revenue in a town like this. What does the town look like as a whole? It's more than just, spending is only half the equation. Revenue is the other half. And we've been saying for a long time that we're a revenue-challenged community because of our nature. And so that's a larger discussion than just the school committee.
We're a revenue challenged state because of Prop 2.5. If your taxes are only going up by 2.5% each year plus new growth, then that means you have approximately 2.5% more money each year over the previous year. And if that's all you...
More than 2.5%.
What'd you say?
Things go up more than 2.5%.
Yeah, inflation goes up more than 2.5%, and you have to give increases to people. So every year that you're not having an operational override, you're essentially making some cuts from the prior year somewhere. If you go 8 years without having an operational override, it starts to stack up. So one way this committee has discussed potentially avoiding this in the future is to have smaller, more frequent overrides every couple of years, rather than Band-Aiding over things with free cash and trying to push it off as long as you can until you have a burning platform that causes lots of damage in other ways. Michael, you were next, and then Jonathan.
Benny had made a great point about what teachers are going to be let go. And my kids went to the Milton Public Schools, and I love my children both equally, but I know one of them would be a much better French teacher than the other. And, the teachers that leave, are they the good ones? Are they better than average, or are they maybe worse than average? Who tends to get hired first away from you when this kind of thing happens?
Well, they're very specific. So they know who they are. They've been called in by the principal on Monday. And there's not one of them that's working in the Milton Public Schools, and I don't want them there.
Right, so if you would rather not have that conversation.
Absolutely.
My point is,
Absolutely.
you're going to lose some very good people.
Absolutely. So you don't work in the Milton Public Schools. This is my reputation. If I don't want you to, and you aren't evaluated as excellent.
Right, okay.
All right, and so these individuals are individuals that would all be working in the Milton Public Schools next year. It's an excellent question.
Well, then Mary Lou brought up something about how did we get here, and then I think Lee Michael basically answered it. But it sounds like, I have a reputation here for being a big spender. But really what I'm trying to do is spend money wisely. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face kind of a thing. And it seems to me that if we have a situation where I voted last year to have an override. And now we have this crisis, and everyone's upset. It's like, I think I've said in the past I wanted to be the king, and I think it's as likely for me to be the king and rule the world as Lee Michael to make the time machine where we can go back a year. But hopefully, out of this process, the town decides to like do things so we don't have to have this story of huge need where we lose good people because we're getting, we're just not running our show like a business. We're running it like a political operation where a story has to be told to scare people once they get to be a crisis. Well, okay, the final thing I'd like to see.
I should say
if I were
on
the
behalf
king-
of me, I don't do this to scare anybody. So I work with the school committee, and I understand budgeting. So that's very important. This is really important that you brought this up. We don't pick positions that are going to scare people. We labor over the positions, and we select the positions, and we have to live with, that's what I said to the principals. We live with this. You're not going to see a different list, ever. If these positions unfunded, these are the people who won't be in the school district.
I'm sorry, Superintendent, I think we have to see a different list because we have $500,000 more to go somewhere. And,
I interrupted you.
Okay, the final point I was going to ask, if we go to our legislators and ask for relief, I heard something, I think, when the school department came and said, we are doing a really good job with SPED. We're doing such a good job with SPED that people are coming to Milton. So why isn't there like a statewide equalization formula? Why would the state run its business, like people move to a different town to just get a good deal? They should be able to stay where they are already and get a good deal. That was editorial, not a question. I don't even need an answer, but I'll make it into a question. Whose job would it be to advocate for that?
Theoretically.
Thank you, Glenn.
Theoretically, the foundation budget for a district takes into account the cost of educating the number of special education children it has, the cost of educating the number of low-income children it has, the cost of educating the number of English language learners it has, as well as regular, generic, general education students who don't fall in any of those categories. And your aid is built based on formulas involving that. The problem with it is those formulas are old and out of date. And one of the things they dramatically do, in particular, is underestimate the cost of educating special education children. The numbers they have per student that they allocate as this should be the cost it takes to educate a special education child is ridiculously low. It's way off the charts. It's way off the charts, yeah. And part of the issue in this last year was this Foundation Budget Review Committee from the legislature, which went into it and looked at the Chapter 70 formula and said, guess what? These formulas are ridiculously low on this factor and this factor and this factor and this factor. And they've recommended, among other things, that they be increased. Brilliant idea, except it takes money. And there's the rub again. So there are recommendations out there to address this. It's not going to happen this year. They're just starting to look at it. It's at least a year, it may be 2 years off before any real change is likely to happen to the Chapter 70 formula. And in the meantime, what you get are these patches that say, we'll give you $25 a student, and off you go. So, yeah, the idea is to address exactly what you're addressing. And so when a child with special needs moves into your district, you basically are compensated for it. It's just, we are dealing with, a 1992 formula that has, crept around a little bit since then, but is in need of some rather serious overhaul. It's not easy.
Hold on one second, Betty.
And you need a really good numbers wonk to do it. And so, it's going to take some time at the legislative level to get that fixed, and it's going to cost money.
I have Jonathan, and then I have Betty. Is there anybody else that's waiting to talk?
Could I just add something to before we leave Mike? Just like Mike mentioned his 2 children, I don't want to end this discussion without saying that just like you have 2 children and one's good and all of these children are our children. the Milton Public School children. All of these children are the citizens of Milton children. So this isn't just an issue about special education or athletic fees or how much the bus costs or what the teacher raises are. This is, I have to tell you, when somebody made a reference, my position is to tell the community what it takes to run the Milton Public Schools. Nothing more, not extra. This is what it takes to run the Milton Public Schools. As the school committee said tonight, 4,000 children, 500 employees. It's a big organization. So I don't want anybody watching to think, well, this is on the back of children with special needs, or this is on the back of athletic fees, or this is on the back of anyone's raises. This is the organization, and everybody who works or leads an organization understands this. These are all of our children. You know, we could talk about why people have art and music. You know, they're all of our children. You wouldn't have sent your children to the Milton Public Schools, I know, if they didn't have art and music. So it's all of our children. I don't want anybody to leave to think that this is, you know, our pride is inclusion. We have a school committee chair who heads up an inclusion task force. This is important to us, all of our children. These are all of our children. These are the children of people who are sitting at this table. And again, transportation's costly. Music and art's costly, athletics costly. All of the programs enter in.
All right, so I have Jonathan and then Betty, and then I'm going to invite Mr. Dennehy to come back up and join the three of you so that we can hopefully have a quick conversation. Jonathan?
Out of the $3 million increase from the request to last year, how many full-time equivalents was that? I just don't recall.
There were three special in the non-contingent budget, there were 3 new special educators driven by enrollment. There was an adjustment counselor of .5 speech pathologist and a .4 English language learner. So there were
Roughly 5.
4.9 FTEs of teachers, and there were 5 aides for special ed.
Okay.
Betty?
I was just going to comment, Glenn, when the ed reform formula first came into being, Milton was one of the communities that wasn't treated well with that formula. So can you speak to that from that 20 years ago? I know. We got a really
24 years ago.
disproportionate, 24, okay, I knew it was a while ago.
1993 was the ed
Important for
reform.
people to know.
It just what, the factors that were involved tended to disproportionately hurt communities that were sort of suburban to Boston, because they were more traditionally bedroom communities and things like that. And one of the reasons was that they used a factor of average wealth in the community. So what's the average income of a person in the town? And in fact, the problem with that is that how much money you have is irrelevant to Proposition 2.5. We could all be millionaires in this town and multi-millionaires, but the fact is you can only go up by 2.5%. So it's more or less irrelevant what I have. It should be based on your ability to raise revenue as a town. And it wasn't taken into account that way. So basically, the formula said, well, if you got a lot of money, you got to do overrides every year. And we did. We did overrides pretty much every 2 to 3 years, from about 1995 through about 2003 or so. And
But I can
2006.
recall that when that formula came into being, and we were looking at how much other communities were getting, Hingham got more than we did, Belmont got more than we did, and there were some really significant communities that I thought were probably better off than Milton, that got a lot more local aid because of that ed reformula. And one of the pieces of the equation was our proximity to Boston. So because we were next door to Boston, that actually hurt us, I remember, in that. And the formula, I think there were like 5 people in the state that understood how to do the formula. You might have been one of them, if I remember.
Ed Moskowitz put it together.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
All right, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for the three of you to stay at the table, but could you push down a little bit and make some room for Michael to join us? I can't hear you. Will, you didn't prepare any statement, right? You're okay? Yeah. Will was, told me before the meeting that he was happy to have Mr. Dennehy represent his letter that he had written to us.
Yeah, so I gave the short version of that, make some room for Katie as well. Thank you for the school department for that. presentation. So we are where Mike Mahalik had mentioned where we are, right? They've identified $760,000 of that 1.26 million for all intents and purposes. So there's still another $500,000 to go, right? So we haven't addressed that with the town side yet. And the impact statement that I ad-libbed, that Will would have presented much more thoroughly than I did, would be larger, would be more daunting, would be further cuts to the library, if it was the town side to accept that portion. And just to run some numbers quickly through, to be fair, right? So the town side is looking at, their FY17 appropriation went up $715,000. They currently sit, in our methodology, with a $312,000 cut. If we add $500,000 to their cut, the town side now takes $97,000 less than they took last year. And the school side gets $2.1 million. Just if we put that $500,000 in perspective and try to come up with...
Which would equal a net decrease over fiscal year 17 for the town side, and a net increase over fiscal year 17 for the schools of like 6-point-something%. Not yet 7, I don't think, but 6-point-something%.
So I think the impact statement from Chief King, Chief Grant, Will, Parks, Cemetery, right down the list, Joe Lynch, wouldn't be prepared tonight because of that anticipated additional shortfall that they would have to pick up.
Well, you're going to have your proposal for what you're going to give to the Board of Selectmen to make this budget balanced, that you'll eventually have to get down to telling the police department what their cut number is, right? So you'll have that statement coming to you hopefully within the next 2 weeks, something like that. We need to see that for when we make our votes, if you want us to consider it. Otherwise, we'll just base our cuts on the testimony that we heard from each department.
Yeah, our testimony earlier tonight is where we're looking for the cuts to come.
Okay.
It's,
So you
you did some back of the envelope math.
Right.
We've talked to each of these departments. I grabbed a couple of them on Friday and just said, what if I took your $93,000 and made it $293,000? And again, I wouldn't do it justice. I would need that department head to sit here and tell you what it means to them. So it's a bit of a hypothetical situation, but I was trying to foster that $500,000 and find a home for it if we could.
So if the warrant committee is going to make cuts on the town side between $300,000 and $800,000, you don't want to tell us what departments you want those cuts to come from? You want us to determine it without your input?
I would ask you to sit down with the department heads. I know you haven't talked to Chief King yet.
Right.
And again, I'll go back to the fact that I can't do them justice. I know Chief Grant has a lot of stuff to talk about. And again, I appreciate what was presented here tonight, but there's that balance that also has to be addressed.
Chairman Walker, did you have something?
I do. So as I said to Mike and Amy this morning, I don't think we should think about this as a $500,000 problem or a zero problem. There's a lot of room in between. The way I'd like to approach it is to say for every $58,000 we can reduce that 1.26 million by, that's saving a position. So if we can come up with $116,000, that's 2 positions and so on. It isn't 500,000 or nothing, and it was never the proposal of the schools that the town side should take the 500,000. If you want a list that gives you 1.26 million in cuts, we can do that. I think you can see by the pattern here how much devastation that will reflect, but we can do that. But my point to Mike and my point to the Warrant Committee is that at the point that we do that, then we notify more people who go out and look for jobs, and we lose. So I just like to be clear where on the timeline we think that's the right thing to do.
I just want to clarify something you said. You said for every $58,000, we save one position, but we cut that amount of money on the other side of the town.
Yes.
So we might be
But-
losing
so-
a
so
position
there-
or something
there-
else
there
on
is
the other
the-
side.
there
So
is the
as a
possibility-
town, we're not necessarily saving that position.
That's right. There is the possibility that if we look on the town side in terms of the expenses, maybe there's some potential savings there that they didn't think about, or they might see differently than the warrant committee sees them. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that on the revenue side, and as I said, we had some discussions about this, there may be areas where the warrant committee's judgment is we could be a little less conservative than we are currently. And if that's the case, then again, that provides some funds that aren't there now.
And yet a further scenario is the warrant committee might determine that some of the contingent requests that were made on the town side are really important and need to be restored, and we have to come up with additional
Absolutely.
cuts somewhere that might even increase the school number even more.
And-
We
and-
have
and-
a big problem.
Yeah, and that's why I said, we have complete confidence that we trust your judgment. So if you say, we've done our due diligence and here's what we think, we have to live with that, and we will.
If I told you that I did this on the back of a napkin, but I really did it in a spreadsheet. The reason why I said earlier, I think that that isn't the worst case scenario for the schools, is because I do find it hard to believe that we will find that much more cuts on the town side to take a full $500,000
So do I.
out. So I'm imagining that the number for the schools will be somewhere between $1 million and $1.3 million. And that is just me. I'm not a committee of one, but you need some direction, I assume,
Right.
when you leave this
So-
meeting to go and think about it.
So $300,000 makes a big difference.
Yep. Sheila, would you like to approach the table? You have to be at a microphone.
Okay.
No.
Two things I want to say. Okay. So the two things that I want to say is, first of all, just for the Warrant Committee, because now you're getting all your information and your intel, and you're making the decisions that you have to make. So right now, what I
Sorry,
know...
Sheila's on the school committee.
I'm on the school committee. Yeah. So the one thing that I want to say, because we are facing an override year, and I did, co-chair the last two overrides and spent a lot of time, because what I've said before is that it is about educating the community. It's about marketing, marketing what an override is, why we need it, and explaining where the cuts would be made in a non-contingent budget. And yes, what other potential asks we would put in there town-wide. In those two previous campaigns, the non-contingent budget had pains everywhere in town. Just want to throw that out there, okay? Because we had to be transparent and on message. So there was always the largest amount of cuts came to school because of the fact that we are the biggest department and the most costly department. So we would always have the largest amounts of cuts. But in those override ask years, there would be staffing damage done to the fire, to the police, issues in DPW, et cetera. So I just want to make that mindful that, I don't want to call it fair and equitable, but it was. And there was pain points to everybody in town. There could be, trash pickup issues, that hurts everyone. If we lost a position in the police force, that hurts everyone in safety. If we lost a position in the fire, that hurts everyone in safety. And then when you also put your contingent budget together when you're doing this, then, if the override passes, we always do, it was always all for one and one for all. It was never people pitting each other against each other. It was everyone coming together to educate the town, to make them aware of where the budget was, to explain to them what the Warrant Committee is, and we'll have to explain to them in a lot of ways what a new strong town administrator is. Education, 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 and marketing and getting it out there.
So I just want you to be mindful of that we have never gone out, I've been here 15 years, where an operational override, the severity of staffing cuts is only going to be to one department. So just be mindful of that. And the other thing is, I know in the non-contingent budget, a lot of the times this year and in the past, that it may be that our ask is bigger than the police and the fire, okay, and DPW, et cetera, et cetera. But I just always want to use this example. I used it tonight at our school committee meeting. I use it to everyone I speak to. The gentleman across the street from me, okay, was, an elderly gentleman who sold his house and moved on to a senior living area. So, in another town. So, as far as the fees to the town, if his house got broken into, the police would handle it the same way. God forbid there was a fire, the fire department would handle it the same way. If picking up his trash and shoveling and making sure the streets are plowed, the same way. Now, there's just been a young family with 3 young kids who have bought that house, okay? So those issues to all those towns won't cost them any more money to service that family. But now, we have 3 kids that are going to come into the school district that we have to service. Our budget's always going to be bigger, and our asks do get bigger than it was last year. It's easier for the DPW. I know there's road issues and things to do, but it's easier for them to not go up as much as we have to go up in that ask, that non-contingent ask, because they don't have 5 more roads to plow, or 25 more roads to plow. And knock wood, because we have a safe and good community, we don't need a special crime units victim that the police department has to put together because crime is up. So I just want you to be mindful that we have to educate the children that come in, and enrollment is soaring, and we have to meet all those needs, and we have to meet those mandates. So I know that sometimes the non-contingent ask seems bigger than everybody else, but at the same time, if we take all of the hits, it's also going to be a harder thing to, I feel, to get an override passed town-wide if only the non-contingent pain is going to be on the schools and not by other places. And I know it's pain point. Mr. Denny, he said trash won't be able to be picked up on Saturdays by the DPW or things that are happening here. But, that's not a big ask to have somebody raise their taxes over that. People raise their taxes when they know that their quality of life is going to be impacted. So I just wanted to put that out there. And the other thing is that I know that it's been spoken at the table about the fact that, how do we not prevent this damage? And I know under Proposition 2.5, the way you do it is every 2 to 3 years you have an operational override. But people do not like to raise their taxes. It is not easy to pass these things. When you bring this up and say at a soccer game or at a baseball game, hey, we're going to need an override this year because the money's lying out the way it is, the Warrant Committee feels we need it, the Selectmen feel we need it. I'm going to be honest, I've been in town government. I urge people to volunteer for a Warrant Committee to town meeting. But the average Joe and Jane, the first thing out of their mouth they say to me is, what's the Warrant Committee? What's that? The educational piece, you guys have to be aware, half of the town don't even know what your purpose is. So the educational piece is so big that you have to do. And if you ask them to raise their taxes every 3 or 4 years, what they'll say to you is, you're asking again, you're asking again, you're not doing enough work, you're not showing enough fiscal responsibility. This is 8 years. That shows a lot of fiscal responsibility that we have cut and picked and pulled and done what we could not to raise people's taxes. And now this is a year of 8 years. That is a huge thing for us to be able to tell the community that we haven't asked this of you. We have not gone to your tax well in 8 years. That is a huge plus for us to get this passed. But we also have to be mindful that I feel like it needs to be, even though our ask is bigger, that if all the damage comes to us, there could be consequences to it. So as you're moving forward, I appreciate all of your volunteerism, all of your hard work. I appreciate what's in front of you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your volunteerism, but I just feel I needed to speak on those 2 points. Thank you.
I think your points were great
Okay.
and succinct, which was awesome.
Surprising.
Yeah, and I really liked your example about the house. And I agree that there probably is a reason why the school budget grows the way it goes versus some other budgets. And I think if you look back over the last many years, you'll see that growth bore out with what that example was. I will say with regard to the selling of an override, the Warrant Committee is tasked with creating a contingent budget that the town can live with.
I know.
Because if an override doesn't pass at town meeting, we have to live with the contingent budget. And for a lot of people in town, the library is more important to them than the school is. And
I'm going to beg, well, to the non-parents. Yes, you're correct.
And for a lot of people in town, I bet they would say, I'd prefer to have police officers and larger class size and cut teachers than cut police officers. So that's what we're looking at.
But yeah, that's fair. But the other thing I think you need to be mindful of is that, because I was one of them, right? I mean, I care about the town. I care about safety. I care about my trash getting picked up. I care about the roads being plowed. But the way I got involved in this whole town government was that the elementary school that my 3-year-old daughter was supposed to go to was not going to get finished. And I said, well, what do you mean it's not going to get finished? What do you mean it's not going to get done? And so I educated myself, and I went to meetings, and I learned. And there were some people who did not have children. There were some people who did not have children in the school district that would volunteer for these overrides. But like 88% of them are school parents that stand out with signs, that do the mailings, that, do the lit drops, that talk and advocate. So it's, and the main catalyst is that they don't want their kids in classes of 30, and they don't want all of the art and the music and those things cut. I'm not saying that people that utilize the library might not help out and do those things, but you have to, there could be a backlash that some parents feel that it's unfair and it's unjust that that the school's going to take all the hits, and that the town in general, that we don't save 2 positions or 3 positions in a non-contingent budget, like Leroy said, every 58,000 or whatever. I understand it's a hard job. I understand what decisions you guys make, and we will respect them. But I just wanted to get this out there for you to just think about it and understand from my experience where I'm coming from.
I see Maggie, and then and then Chairman Walker, and then Katie.
I just wanted to
Hold on
make-
one second. I just wanted to say, but I don't see a cut list yet from Mr. Dennehy. So I don't know what the best case scenario for the town, for the non-school departments, is $312,000 in cuts. According to what he presented. I don't know how many FTEs that equates to. It's not 0, because the library already testified that they're going to have to make a cut. I don't have the rest of the testimonials yet, but I don't think it means 0 cuts on the town side. Maggie?
I just wanted to make a quick, thank you. Just a quick note, we advocated for a strong town administrator. Everyone seemed to be on the same boat, that we want to run Milton as a business. So you have Mr. Dennehy that's going to be making some tough decisions, and I think it's something we have to stand behind him and try to rally together and try to get this done in the most conducive way for everyone. That's all, just a point.
Chairman Walker?
What we call the character of our community is without a doubt attributable to any number of factors. It's attributable to the incredible public safety environment that we experience, living right beside communities that have higher crime rates for some reason. Ours isn't anywhere near that. The work that Public Works does is important. The work that the fire department does is important. So it is certainly the case that the character of our community is a combination of all of those things. I don't think anyone would argue with that. It's also the case that the reason that when we looked at home values and the how those home values fluctuated even during the Great Recession starting in 2008, that Milton seemed to be somewhat insulated from the declines that other communities saw. I think at worst, home values went down 1 or 2% during those years, and other communities experienced much larger drops. This is some of the research that NESDEC did for us when we looked at enrollment. And their conclusion was that we were one of 3 or 4 hotspots in the state where families were moving in at an extraordinary rate because of the schools. But that doesn't mean that we should only focus on the schools. It does mean that we should acknowledge that even for those individuals who don't have children in school anymore, that they have enjoyed an environment where their home values didn't decrease as much and are now increasing at a much faster rate because of the school system. So I don't think we need to argue about, we have a great community, there are a whole host of reasons why. The schools play an important part in that role.
Chairwoman Conlon?
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to turn my seat over to the town accountant, Amy Dexter, in a couple of minutes. I wanted to just give, particularly for your new members, just a bit of clarification to some of what my friend Mr. Walker said about the process this year. It was a little bit different this year, and that was intentional. When we put the town administrator legislation into play 2 years ago, it was drafted by our board with the Town Government Study Committee, went through the Warrant Committee, was recommended by the Warrant Committee, passed overwhelmingly at town meeting, went through the state legislature. It had initially been based on some other communities' town administrator statutes. The point was, when you went back a number of years to the years that I served on the Warrant Committee with Leroy, Glenn, before both of us, the Warrant Committee, and in particular the Warrant Committee chair, a volunteer was really the person, with some help from a former town accountant, but often not enough, putting together the town's revenue projections. That was the person responsible for projecting the town's revenue, for building the initial budget, and with the committee and the subcommittees focusing on the individual departments, ultimately bringing something forward to town meeting. A group of 15 volunteers, most of whom had day jobs, who weren't the people who were living here with the budget day in and day out. The point there's a lot of things that are now with the responsibility of the town administrator, but with respect to the budget, the idea was for management. Now, the town administrators, think of the town administrator as the chief operating officer on the non-school, non-library, non-parks, non-cemetery side. There's a lot of independent boards here that make this a little bit different than what you'd see at the state or federal level. But the idea was for that management, with the town administrator at the top, but all the department heads, the town accountant, the assistant superintendent for business, the library director, the parks director, all of those people collectively to be working on putting together a budget that would be presented not only to our board, but more importantly, to this board as the starting point for the discussion. And that's what Mike Dennehy, along with all of the people he's been working with, is putting forward to you tonight. Board of Selectmen unanimously stands behind his efforts and his work that he has done. Now, it's correct that the process has changed this year. It had also changed a few years ago. It used to be that the Warrant Committee chair and the former town accountant were doing a lot of the work, and then bringing in at different times during the year, that maybe the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the chair of the school committee. It was a little bit more ad hoc. The last few years, it's been the Warrant Committee chair, the town administrator, the town accountant, the assistant superintendent, sometimes the Board of Selectmen chair, sometimes the school committee chair, taking part in discussions as the fall began and we went right through the winter and into the spring. The Board of Selectmen stepped back from that this year. None of the three of us, went to any of those discussions, had any part in the meetings, and we did that intentionally because we wanted to fulfill what the objective was, which was to transfer this preparation of the budget that's presented to you to management, and that's what's been done. So this is management's presentation. Now, there's not unanimous agreement on it. There's a large cut on the school side, the 80%, and we fully respect and understand the concerns that the schools have, and no one wants to hear the cuts that Superintendent Gormley just went through. That's not to say that there's not an impact on services on the town side. We heard that there may be a position cut in the library tonight. There are other impacts on services that Mr. Dennehy outlined, whether it's parking enforcement in East Milton Square, whether it's ability to do some of the projects that the DPW wants to do. So there will be an impact on services, and there's many needed positions on the town side that are in the contingent budget that the former town administrator and the current town administrator charged department heads to put only in the contingent budget and not in the non-contingent budget. So it's a different approach that was taken on the school side and on the other, among the other departments, and not all of them are under the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator. A lot of them are under independent boards, but the same approach was taken by all of the non-school departments, and I think that's an important point to bring out. The $2.8 million increase that the schools are seeking over FY17 is very different than the amount that the non-school departments are seeking. And that's the reason for the 80-20. That's a huge difference, but that's the reason for it. Hasn't always been that wide a discrepancy in every year. Sometimes it's closer, and it's not as big of a, but it's a different approach that was taken. So the town departments started with FY17 numbers and then added on a contractual increase. That might mean whatever the collective bargaining agreement required for salaries. That might mean what an equipment lease would require for an increased payment in the next year. So it's a different approach. We fully agree with everyone who said, we're all in this together. This is something that we have to look at globally. And if there's, I think Dr. Pavlicek probably said it best. Revenue numbers might change a little bit as we go forward. This committee, it's almost as on the state level. The governor delivers a budget to the legislature. The federal level, the president delivers a budget to Congress. The town administrator, representing not just himself, he's ultimately responsible for delivering it, but it's supposed to be the combined effort of all of the management and the department heads, is presenting it to you. You, as the advisor to the legislative body of this town meeting, are going to present your own recommendation. And we're looking to work forward. We're looking forward to working with you as we go through the process. But we really hope that you'll treat Mr. Dennehy's presentation with the credibility and the respect that I think it deserves, because it really was intended by many people, not just our board, by a vote of town meeting, by the town government study committee participating with us in writing this. This is the first year we're going through this process. It's a learning experience for all of us. We might come through this in May or June and say, gee, looking back at it, for next year's budget, we might want to make these couple of changes, or we might have done something a little bit differently. So we'll probably get to that point and have a breakout of what worked, what didn't, what might we need to change. But this is a collective effort, and we really hope that this will inform your decision-making. You're probably not going to we don't expect you to rubber stamp it. You're probably going to have some differences here and there, and we will be looking forward to going through the process with you and taking part in it and helping as much as we can. But I think those are important things to bring out, and I really hope that you'll take this for what it is, not anything more, not anything less, and then do your own due diligence and come up with your own recommendation, hopefully based on some information that has been provided. And I know that the town administrator and the town accountant will be happy to look at whether it's cuts on the town side of the non-contingent budget or help narrow what the final number should be on the town side for a contingent budget, working with the library trustees, the park commissioners, and certainly the school committee, and we will be looking to them for guidance on their contingent budget as well. But I just wanted to clarify, especially for your new members who don't perhaps know the background of how this has come about this year, that's where we've been and where we're, and hopefully that clarifies some information for people. So thank you very much.
think that
And I'm
was
going to give
helpful.
Amy Dexter my seat.
Appreciate it.
Well said.
I appreciate your comments, and I just want to echo, I didn't say it earlier tonight, but this is a learning year. It is a transition year. I've said that many times at Warrant Committee meetings prior to tonight, but just to reiterate it, what Chairwoman Conlon just said, we're all trying to figure this out for the first time. So I think we're all trying to be as cooperative as possible, and we will have that meeting where we decide, where we have the postmortem and say how it can be better done next year. But we need to get through it this year. And unfortunately, there's an override potential on top of it all. Amy, did you have comments?
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments related to Mr. Walker's opening statements regarding the budget process. Okay, I'm going to try to keep them short and to the point, but my point of view is not my point of view. I take exception to the fact that the process it's been indicated that myself and Ms. Fagan did not reach out for assistance with the budget preparation, with revenue estimates. The process, from that standpoint, hasn't changed from prior years. Any group meetings we've had, including Dr. Pavlicek or the school committee or other department heads, were really initiated by the Warrant Committee. As you know, being the chair, we've often gone down parallel paths where the former town administrator and myself have been formulating the budget on our side, the Warrant Committee on theirs. We meet periodically to match. I have reached out to Dr. Pavlicek several occasions. I've asked him his opinion about local aid. I've asked him his opinion about the assessments. I've asked him his opinion about Blue Hills. I have reached out, and that's all I want to say is I have not, and nor has Ms. Fagan, sat in a bubble, or Mr. Dennehy, and formulated these without inclusion or exclusion, as I believe it was commented. So I take pride in all the work that we've done. I think we have all worked together well. I don't think that anything intentional was done. But as you know, we didn't receive several of the large budgets, including the schools and DPW, until early December, maybe the second week of December. Mr. Dennehy is new. Ms. Fagan is transitioning out. We had to present, or Mr. Dennehy had to present, preliminary balanced budget on January 10th. That gave us a month over the holidays to do it. There wasn't a lot of time to have these outreach meetings. I did a lot of the questions by email, and I just want to I want you to have my opinion of how the process went, and I do believe that Ms. Fagan, Mr. Dennehy, and I did reach out to not only the school department and Dr. Pavlicek, but also other town departments, including the schools, the police, and the library, Board of Health. We've worked very closely with all of them, and the revenues are the revenues. They're not going to solve the problem. Local receipts are about $6 to $7 million. That is not going to solve the $1.5 million problem. No matter how hard we try, it's not going to solve the problem. And I call them conservative, but they're not even that conservative. I even sat with Dr. Pavlicek and Ms. Fagan yesterday, showed them my logic, which was also presented at the January 10th meeting. There's no wiggle room in there right now. There just isn't. So I just felt that I needed to, unfortunately the word I'm going to use is defend the process, because I feel it, we have been including people. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
I need a sidebar with the Warrant Committee for a few minutes here. It seems like we might have to split a baby tonight because both Mr. Dennehy and the schools need some direction as to what they should do over the next 2. And we know that we have a $1.572 million shortfall. What I did on the spreadsheet that's on the screen is in the far right-hand column, you see Mr. Dennehy's estimates. I threw them in there right as the meeting was starting. I hope that they are error-free. On the left side of the spreadsheet, you see the budgets that were submitted for fiscal year 18 non-contingent, and then I just took a straight line percentage of how much of the budget each of those departments was, calculated that, and then attributed the shortfall on an equal percentage basis to each one of them. So that presents a range, and that range might work for you folks, and it might not work for you folks. I'd like to get some feedback from you, and then I'd like to be able to give some direction to the folks in the room as to what they should do, with their budgets right now. But the range that I'm looking at right now shows from a low of an impact on the town side from Mr. Dennehy's projections of $312,524 in cuts to a potential high of $544,799 in cuts if you just use the straight line allocation. And then for the schools, a worst case scenario of $1,259,980 in the right-hand column to a best case scenario, which is terrible, of $1,027,705. That's much higher than the cuts that they voted through tonight, and a much worse number than they want. But I think that we heard, from them earlier that they understand that all of the $500,000 can't land on the non-school side. So that's a range. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think it's fair to say to these folks, please go back and come up with some potential cut scenarios based on this range so that we have the information that we need to build the non-contingent budget? Maggie first, and then
Well, I
Jean.
do, because, first of all, based upon what Amy just stated, there really is no wiggle room. So it looks like there's quite a bit of a range there. Maybe they need to go back, and everyone has to figure it out based upon having no wiggle room.
Jean?
So you just did a weighted average?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, having said that, we know that they're people heavy, and that would just be cuts on people. But I was wondering, what would be the harm of, and I don't know if we can do this here, of a budget freeze? What if we put on hold all travel? What if we put on hold a scrutiny on the purchases of paper, and the scrutiny of purchases of new printers that haven't been purchased yet, of all those little things, which I think ultimately is what's going to put this budget together. It's not going to be a big a windfall. I think it is going to take maybe a few thousand, 100,000 from the legislature, and I think it's going to be some positions. But I have done this not quite as late as February, but I had to do this in December when half of a fiscal year is, and it has been effective. So I think maybe we could look at it.
What would the impact of a budget freeze be, say, on the schools? Because right now, their increase is $2.8 million over fiscal year 17. Would you say 0 increase? What's budget freeze mean to you?
Budget freeze means to me that every item that hasn't been purchased budget-wise is examined. It doesn't have to be a fait complete. Just because it's budgeted does not mean that it has to be spent.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know, I don't know what the allocations mean right now. I don't know if the purchases have happened at the beginning of the year, and there isn't any float. But I think it might be something that we look at.
Okay, well, we're working on next year's
Yeah.
fiscal budget, so nothing has been purchased with that money yet. And if we were to stop a spending freeze right now,
Yeah.
some of that money would flow to free cash, but as Amy has warned us in the past, there isn't a straight line, save a dollar here, it
That's
pops
right.
out next year.
That's right.
So, okay. That was the point you were going to make? Okay. All right, good. Did you have something down there?
I was just getting back to your prior.
You wanna go back to the spreadsheet?
When it's appropriate, I didn't want to.
Go ahead.
I mean, if I can just try to put the words where I think you've done it, you basically shifted basically the 80-20 split to a 65-35 split based on, you're using last year's allocation for the split of the problem, if you will, as opposed to the 80-20, which is kind of a pro rata share of what created the problem.
Yep, about. And the reason why I'm suggesting we do that is because if we have to make decisions in the next couple of weeks about which budgets get cut in the non-contingent scenario, I don't think that we have all the information that we need right now in order to decide which positions stay or go, or which services stay or go, or which budgets stay the same or go down. So I would think that we would want to give the departments in the school an opportunity to say, okay, this is the impact on us, and we would need to have that impact on a range in order to be able to implement it some way. So I'm not saying it's going to be 80-20 or 35-65 or even somewhere in between there. It probably would be somewhere in between there, but I don't think we have the information right now that they want us to have in order to make that decision. We could make the range bigger if you wanted to. Yep.
So, as I'm thinking about this, and one of the things that's resonating with me from the school committee is if they are given a bigger number and they have to go and come up with cuts, that they select particular positions and therefore motivate certain people to go and look for work elsewhere. One of the things that would help, I think, in as we balance this down the line, an override seems like it's inevitable. It's a gamble, of course. You don't know if you're going to get it or not. But with the other departments, if they have to come up with a larger number and they have to signal particular personnel cuts, is it harder for them to refill those positions than the school, or is it a lot easier? You know, how can we become better informed about that? Because it sounds, from their perspective, that, you know, that's a pretty major concern and would leave the town a lot worse off to lose those experienced people.
I think I'll turf that question to Mr. Dennehy in a minute, but I just want to point out that whatever non-contingent budget we come up with, even if we make it, you know, harder on the town side, as you're suggesting, than what we discussed earlier, because let's say that those positions are easier to fill. If the non-contingent budget passes and the contingent budget fails, we have to live with the cuts that we made. So when we put the budget together, we have to say, not just, okay, we're betting on the contingent passing and we'll be able to refill those positions. We have to be saying, we can live with the town services at this funding level. Do you want to answer his question? Is it easier to fill some of
Theoretically
those?
and generally, you're dealing with civil service on a lot of those, you know, you'd be looking at police, fire, and public works. You'd be looking at civil service list, and that would be for the bargaining unit, and I'm not sure how they refill a position that may be advertised as being laid off and then later refunded, if you will. But civil service is there, and they have a set of regulations and rules that they have to apply to with respect to that. So I don't know if it's a similar situation where, you know, people were notified today, unfortunately, and they run out and find another job. I'm not sure exactly how civil service will sort out a firefighter, or a policeman, or most of those public works jobs have a civil service complement to them.
Okay. Others? Questions, comments about the spreadsheet, the range? Yep.
It seems perfectly reasonable.
Somewhat reasonable place to start.
It'll be within those ranges.
So it's somewhat reasonable to say the cuts on the non-school side probably won't be less than 312,000, and they probably won't be more than 544. We don't know 100%, but that's a reasonable place assumption to make right now. And on the schools, they probably won't be less than $1 million, and they probably won't be more than 1.259. We don't know for sure, but that's a reasonable assumption to make today. And hopefully that gives you guys some direction so that you can go and collect some more information and give it back to us so that we can make an informed decision, or a decision that's informed with at least the information you want us to have.
It does. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything else from the committee before? Anybody want to stop that? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some budgets.
Sure.
Okay? Alphabetical order, unless
Sure.
there's a different order. Okay.
This is alphabetical. This
Yes,
is good.
that's right. All right, so we're going to start with audit then. And we have the audit in front of us. We had a great narrative for this that spoke to the GASB 45 valuation difference. Are there any questions that people have that were not answered by this narrative?
Motion to approve the budget as presented?
Second?
Thanks, Maggie. Any discussion about the audit budget? Yes, Steve?
Just one, I noted that you're going to be procuring new auditing services, and I just want to congratulate you for doing that. Others of the town department should be doing the same thing. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was the audit committee with the assistance of Mr. Dennehy and myself, but that RFP went out
January
17th?
17th.
Somewhere around there, and it's due February 17th, so.
And I say that because the town's interests are best served by making sure that we're getting good customer service and the best prices that we can. And when we keep the same consultants for a long, long time, there's no guarantee that that's happening. And, you know, if we wind up with the same people, at least they know that they're not guaranteed the work, so I think it's a great thing to do.
Go ahead.
Do you have any sort of commitment from the existing firm, though, that, they'll do it for the proverbial 58 too, or?
They were sent the same
Yeah.
request for proposal, and I do anticipate that they will respond. I've actually only received questions from one firm so far.
I guess, said a different way, when you put out a proposal, do you give them guidance on what the budget is?
If they ask, I do, yes, which this one firm has asked me what the actual fees for fiscal 16 broken down by area was. So if they ask for that, I do provide that.
It's more for my learning, and nothing to do with the budget, more.
And in this case, they are publicly available numbers, so
Right.
it's a little different than running an RFP at a business.
I was approached by 2 of those companies at the MMA.
Okay.
And they're very eager, so,
Good.
to Mr. McCurdy's point, it's.
Any other discussion
valuable
from the warrant
experience.
committee? All those in favor of approving the budgets as is? It is unanimous. Great. All right, so we'll go to central business office next. Do folks have any questions about CBO other than what was answered in the narrative? See the increase in salary and wages there, do the percentage. I don't have any questions.
Contractual Steve?
Services.
You want to go to Schedule E and look at contractual services is going from 11,000 actual down to 0, and the narrative,
It was also 0 in 17, though, I believe.
oh,
Right, that
The
relates to
16.
the parking ticket processor, which was moved to the treasurer's
Right.
department in 17. So it's just elsewhere.
Motion to approve the budgets as presented?
thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potter. Any discussion? All those in favor? It is unanimous. Great. So now, group insurance, is that okay?
Sure.
All right, so group insurance, contingent budget request includes an additional $300,000 to account for new hires under the contingent budget, if it is approved. And both budgets include a $35,000 increase in the town share of Medicare tax to level it with fiscal year 16 actual expense. Do you want to add to that or clarify anything on that, Amy?
On the Medicare or just on the budget in general?
The 35,000. I just wanted to make sure everybody
No, it just
understood
seems to
that.
have been increasing.
Okay.
Can't really explain why, so I,
You're just trying to match actual costs? Yep.
So this is the rabbit out of the hat budget here. If we actually looked and see how we're doing in this fiscal year, because it's just I look at big budgets, because
Right.
little movements in big budgets make a difference.
well, if you look closely, this budget is only going up 35,000 from last fiscal year. That's huge. This budget usually goes up hundreds of thousands. We have met with Cook and Company, who helps us with goes over the claims for the self-insurance. And we usually look at claims through 7 or 8 months of the year to make sure they're not unusually high. That's what will base the premium increase come July 1, based upon what our claim experience has been. We only have 6 months into the year. This budget right here includes an approximate 2% increase in premiums, offset by negotiated change in the split. It used to be 80-20. The unions have, most of the unions except for fire and police, which haven't been finalized or negotiated yet, have agreed to a change from 80-20 to 78-22. So they offset, and that's why it's remained somewhat, level with the prior year, which is huge. Usually this one's like $400,000 above the prior year because of the premium increase.
So if the, could police and fire get settled this year? No?
Yes, I hope to.
And is there a chance that that they could agree to the 78-22? that would have changed this number.
No,
it
because
wouldn't.
we're assuming in
You're
this
assuming they
budget.
will.
Assuming.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Got
So
it.
this
Wanna-
could go in.
Could go
in
the
theory,
other
could-
direction.
Could go in the other direction,
Right.
but we're hopeful that we'll come to an agreement. All other collective bargaining agreements have agreed to that, including the schools, right? The schools.
Correct.
So
Good?
we're hopeful.
Yes, Steve?
I'm a little confused, Amy, because you said that the premium went up 2%, but the total only moved,
35,000.
So the premium went up 2%,
yeah, did you
but
lose
the
staff?
town, no, but the town
Cut in
share
more?
went
Okay.
from 80 to 78.
Okay.
So it went down 2%.
Okay.
So now, I kept the census numbers fairly the same. That's the other place that could significantly change what we actually spend is if, for instance,
I got you.
if there's people not on and all of a sudden they get married and have a baby, they're gonna maybe come on to our plan or go from individual to family. So one small person, all of a sudden their spouse loses coverage and they come onto the town plan, that's an 18,000 increase for one census change.
Mike, you're the subcommittee chair over this, right?
Yeah.
Just a couple of points that you might want to be jotting down for the comment,
I got a pen.
for the warrant. One is Chuck's point, or Amy's point to Chuck's answer, which was, if the bargaining agreements don't shake out the way that we're hoping them to, this number could go up. And then the second point there, sorry, help.
If
I have one point, I have one other point that I could mention.
Oh, yeah, the
If-
2% reduction is offset by, the 2% increase is offset, yeah, right. Yeah. Great. You want to make a comment, and then I'll go to Jonathan Schimmel.
Potentiality for the stuff we talked about earlier tonight. If those people tend to carry insurance through the town, you could see a reduction in that line.
But keep in mind, they're talking about 18.4 in cuts, but there's also ads
Yeah,
for the sped. So you're not going to get 18 times 18,000, and you'd also have to look and see who those people are.
Yep.
They might not even have coverage. But that could be offset by someone all of a sudden coming on the plan. So that's
number
a
could
little
move.
bit, yeah.
It could go down.
Jonathan,
That was the question. You've answered it.
Maggie?
I just have a quick question. Do you offer health and group health insurance just for, not just the family or an individual, just for a spouse? And is there any potential for savings if you were able to do something like that, as opposed to having a family
No,
plan?
I believe right now that we only offer family or individual coverage. That would be a question for the HR director, why that is or
Have a lot
what
of
it would take
savings.
to do that. I'm not sure why that's not offered. We'd have to reach out to her. She's on vacation until Monday.
I ran some quick numbers. There's 904 policies with Cook and Company. 44% are family and 50% are HMO Blue.
It'll be interesting out of the families, how many might just be insuring just a spouse, and what the savings could possibly be.
Yep. Yeah, we've discussed that before. That's something to look at. It makes us less competitive, but yeah. Or it might make us less competitive if everybody else isn't doing it. Other questions or comments on the group insurance budget?
Motion to approve contingent and non-contingent budgets as presented?
Second.
Thank you. No, you're fine. I got you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Looks like unanimous. General insurance is next. If there's anything that people need me to put on the screen, if you don't have it in front of you, just let me know. Okay.
Was there a narrative with this?
What did you say?
Was there a narrative with
Yeah.
this?
The narrative is on the final tab here of the spreadsheet.
Got it.
Do you need to see that, Chuck?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so looking at the general insurance budget, do people have questions that were not answered by this narrative? or do they have questions about the narrative?
I have a question, and it could be in the narrative, and it could not be, but I'm looking, 16, actual at 800,000, significantly below where it was budgeted, and then bouncing back up. What was it that happened then to save 350,000, and is there any likelihood of a recurrence of that?
So I spoke with Anne Marie Fagan yesterday on her last day here, and she walked me through it. So Meyer is a pool, so there's credits involved based on how things are paid out from the pool, and you earn credits and endorsements. The workman's comp in FY16, they asked us to budget for $370,000. It was actually $303,000 because of premium and Maya credits. Obviously, there was $67,000 that the town gained from that. Similarly, the multi-peril, FY16 was $543,000. It was actually $386,000. She does not anticipate and does not want people to expect that to happen year after year. It's based on the number of claims. The FY18 numbers are predicted on 3 prior year claims history. And again, we are in a pool with other communities and have been since 1994. So it's an ebb and flow of claims. And you know, there are some credits that we get for paying within the first 30 days, which kudos to her, saved the taxpayers some money. So, but she cautioned that we don't expect those numbers on an annual basis.
So if we did hit any savings for 17, it wouldn't be until right up till the end of the year, and then it would just have to flow into the free cash calculations, not the free cash, right, Amy?
Right.
Calculation.
Thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Maggie?
I'm just assuming you've been in this pool, that it's a cost savings. Do you ever look at other alternatives where you said you've been in the same pool since 1992, as opposed to, do you ever put the insurance out to bid?
Sure. So we had a company come in, a major insurance company, come in to pitch us last week about their product. And they're well aware of the fact that Maya has a very strong foothold on communities like Milton. We did listen to their pitch. We were waiting for Paige Eppolito to get back to town to run some numbers by her. But yeah, we are entertaining other people.
Yes, Steve?
What do we pay, or how do we pay Cook and Company? And is that something that you'll be looking to periodically try to procure those sort of consulting services on insurance?
We do get invoices from them, but I'd have to look what that is based on. That would be another question for.
I don't understand the
Paige.
implication of the question. What do you mean?
Cook and Company provides us some consulting services, probably not for free.
Oh, all right.
So what is that?
So you're asking where the budget for that is?
And, you know, is that something that has just been renewed for 35 years because we have a good relationship with Cook and Company, or is?
I'm not sure how long Cook has.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Been here as
Right.
long as I've been here. I think it's been a while. I know that Ms. Fagan she and I have had discussions when the audit and the legal, you know, to your comment that you should go out, that was one that she said, you guys need to think about this, you know, as she's leaving. You guys need to, this is another one. No, well,
We get it.
yeah, I mean, I don't think their fees are, I don't know where in the budget the fees are.
Is there any way we can just, maybe you might be able to dig it up, just so we have an idea?
We can ask Miss Eppolito when she gets back from vacation on Monday.
Okay.
Maybe Tuesday, because her list is building.
All right. Well, okay. Anything else? Is there any reason then to hold this budget, or could we, if we got information that was surprising, we could always revote it, I suppose?
Motion to approve the budget as presented?
Contingent and non-contingent. Thank you, Michael. Discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, I'm going to move on to the law budget, for which I do have some questions.
Just talk a little bit about the law budget.
Well, go for it, Michael. Why don't you kick us off? What'd you
Yeah, I
say?
wrote this big report. Did this get around to bringing all my notes you want to send to me?
Did you send it to me?
We got it.
You got it?
Thank you.
Oh, never mind.
I didn't get it.
Have the highlights,
No.
Mike, please?
Yeah, the highlights would be good at this hour, wouldn't it? Law budget. We asked about, would want to bring in-house help to do this kind of a thing, same thing as the craftsman and the handyman for the special, for the consolidated facilities. And actually, there's so many diverse legal needs in this town that we really kind of need to have outside legal counsel, but we wouldn't want to have somebody working for the town. The last time legal services went up to bid was 1989. There are pros and cons of staying with somebody, but, you know, eventually you gotta shop for other bids, so we're gonna do that, and that's coming up.
When is that coming up?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've discussed that in length with Ms. Fagan, and we need to give Mr. Dennehy a chance to get settled in before we consider changing audit firms and legal at the same time. So hopefully within the upcoming year, we'll look at it in fiscal 18.
Chair Conlon?
Oh. And they're appointed by the Board of Selectmen, so it would be something that would be consulted
Has
with
to
the
be
Board of
vetted.
Selectmen.
Okay. Well, the warrant committee has delivered the message to the previous town administrator, so I think it's only fair that we tell you that we think that the law service should be put out to bid every so often. And when was the last time it was put out to bid?
1989.
1989. That seems like a long time to go.
I agree.
Sorry for the interruption, Michael.
No, it's okay. That's all we had about, I mean, we talked about some other things, but not really.
Maggie?
Just general, I don't understand why these large contract items like the law or even insurance, why they're not put out to bid every so many years. I mean, for competitive prices.
Chuck, did you want to?
So I work in the government space. You don't want to spend all your time doing RFPs for services. One. Two, your outside counsel is a pretty special relationship. I think it's something you should put out to bid. I think 1989 is a long time. It should go out to bid, but that's something you don't want to do.
Every 5 years?
I would say more like 10. You know, my personal, professional opinion.
If you're happy.
Yeah.
If you're happy. If you're unhappy, you do it right away. But I mean, it's a, you know, it's a lot of work to do these RFPs, and so I would say stagger them, and it's you know, you do maybe 1 or 2 a year, so they're kind of come on a cycle. That would be my recommendation. You can't. They're hard to do.
1, 2, 3. Hold on. And we did have long discussions about this in the past, and one of the things that was brought up is that there's a ton of institutional knowledge that's kept with having a long-term relationship with an attorney, but 1989 is a long time ago. But so you have to weigh those things against each other, is that you want your attorney to know how you operate so that they can be effective in answering your questions. I think I had Steve first.
Yeah, I mean, I would like at some point to mine down into this idea of there being so many diverse areas of law that have to be mastered that you couldn't bring someone in-house to take care of some of them, because, you know, this budget is very big and growing, and, you know, there's still the opportunity to have a generalist in municipal law that can be helpful, and still have an outside firm that you can bring in as needed for some of the other issues. And, you know, having them available for, you know, 18 hours a week at $200 an hour to get to 370, as opposed to like a $50 or $60 an hour. It, you know, it seems like that would be worth, you know, some, maybe not to assign the government study group more to do, but it just doesn't make sense to me to continue to farm it out. The retainer went up from 16 to 17 and then 17 to 18, so 12% increase in the retainer over 2 years. It's a little out of whack with inflation and other things. So there's stuff going on that I think this one bears a little closer look, somewhere down the line.
Chair Conlon, did you want to
I
respond to that?
wanted to try to answer that question about the in-house counsel that a couple of people have raised. The Town Government Study Committee looked at that several months ago, and this is probably before Mr. Dennehy's time, so, and Ms. Dexter's probably not aware of this. They looked at that, and they did some research, and they concluded that it really wasn't going to achieve a significant amount of savings, and it really wasn't worth pursuing at that time. That's what I was told by the chair of the Town Government Study Committee. So it's not that that hasn't been considered. A committee that's charged with looking at how do we improve and make town government more efficient has taken a pretty hard look at it, and that was their conclusion. I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know what all the pros and cons were, but they did report that they had taken a good look at it and concluded it just wasn't, in their view, worth pursuing at that point. And the appointment of town council is totally within the discretion of the Board of Selectmen. We're the ones who appoint town council. When I was on the Warrant Committee, that question came up, so I hear where you're coming from, Steve. It's been a long time. On the other hand, there are only a handful of firms that specialize in municipal law. The firm that represents this town and has done so well for many years has a lot of experts in different areas. When we need certain expertise, we go out, and if we have to, we go out and get it. And for one example on that, we have an attorney who for many years has been handling the cable contracts, the RCN and Comcast. That's not handled by John Flynn's firm. That's handled by an attorney in Boston who's a specialist in that area and who has represented the town for quite a number of years. The Board of Selectmen recently hired an aviation counsel based out of Washington, D.C., who's giving us some expert advice in the area of aviation issues. So we do bring in experts when they're needed, but we're fortunate that we have a longstanding relationship with Mr. Flynn, who is a resident of the town, who has really a lengthy and 30 plus years of, almost 30 years of knowledge of the town boards and committees and what the different issues have been, what the cases have been. A lot of the litigation tends to go on for years. So the points you're raising are all good ones, and they've been raised in the past, and there will be probably the right time to come for that, but the board values the advice we get from town council and really appreciates all the work that his firm does. And there's not a lot of competitors, and there are some, but there's not a lot of competitors in this space. So we're mindful of those, and it's something that we have thought about in the past, especially when we've come here before the Warrant Committee on the budget. But it's, we hear your point. We think there are some other issues that are just as important. And we're not, I work in a law firm downtown. I mean, the rates that we're paying to our town council are by no means unreasonable. They're very reasonable, even for municipal work. These are not exorbitant amounts that we're spending, and we're actually looking for an increase this year because we have some ongoing litigation. We expect we're going to have some additional costs, and I'm happy to answer any other questions about it because there may be some that go back before Mr. Dennehy's time, but I thought those are important points just to bring up to your attention.
I have Jonathan and Jean and Maggie.
Well, I was just going to make a comment that, Ms. Collins just basically affirmed as probably more knowledgeable, as these fees don't seem exorbitant to me. The retainer, how does it, if there's no continual review, is there a step up as far as the retainer goes? Is there an agreed?
From the 60 to 65,000?
Very small
agreed
amount.
schedule? Like without an RFP, you would understand it. Clearly, they're not using 1989 prices.
No, that gets adjusted every year, and sometimes there are years when it stays flat. But the retainer usually covers services to boards and committees. So when when Lee Michael, as chair of this committee, runs warrant articles or recommendations and whatnot by town council, that's covered under the retainer. When town council is advising other boards on kind of routine matters or just that's all covered under the retainer. It's this litigation or the contractual services or real estate deals, anything that's or a specific project that's going to take some time or involve a substantial amount of work that's outside of the course of ordinary town council services, that's when it's billed under professional services. So the retainer really covers throughout the year all of the advice, and there's a lot of different boards and downtown departments that make a lot of use of town council, so that's what the retainer covers.
I was more suggesting those, if we haven't had anybody since 1989, clearly in 1989, it was probably 20,000. Like, what determines?
Yeah, this has increased over time.
But what determines that if we're not signing a new agreement?
Like, is it a contract, you mean?
There is a contract signed every year. The town council is appointed annually, and the town administrator signs a contract with the firm.
Jean, do you still have a question?
Well, I don't know what the term is for auditors, but they used to apply the the same thing, that it was easier to keep an auditor on because they were familiar with the field, they were familiar with the employees, they were familiar with the philosophy, and that turned into a lot of corruption over the years. So then states started applying laws, like you could keep them for 3 years. I don't know what it is now, but you had to change. So I don't see why you would put that forward just as a question, more than what we've been doing. And also, I've worked with auditors who have been new to the firm, and they ask questions and they look at things differently, and sometimes that's not bad either. So I think there's an argument for both sides.
Yes, I agree with you,
Duly
Gina,
noted.
especially on the audit side.
Yeah.
They're looking at financial management, passing on that. The roles of the attorneys obviously is different, where they're actually representing the town, either defending the town in litigation or prosecuting litigation for the town. So there's a obviously different function, and I think there's a difference in the need to go out to bid RFP on each of them. Not to say that you would never go out on law, and clearly this point has come up many times in the past. But there seems, in my view, there seems to be a greater need to do it in the audit context than in the law context.
Yeah.
Maggie?
So if we hire a procurement officer, which is for another item, do they just do the materials, or would they also do services if you put things out for bid?
They do it all.
Okay.
Yes.
The only thing I have about the selectmen, and this is not personal, is if you're hiring the law firm, then they're answering to you, and they're under your direction. And to me, it just seems better to have a third party do the hiring where it's just clearer, maybe. I don't know.
That is established by our bylaws.
Yeah, I'm not sure who the third party would be, because the,
Well, maybe the procurement officer, I'm just saying, because they may.
Well, the procurement officer would, probably going forward would have a role in the, if it were to go out to bid, would have a
Right.
role in the award, in the bidding process.
But the selectmen would still choose to make the appointment,
Based upon his.
based on the bylaws, yeah.
Or his recommendation.
Steve?
So to the contingent and non-contingent, there's a $75,000 difference. And maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but it looks to me like that this extra 75 is for the aviation attorneys.
Well, not necessarily the aviation attorneys, but because we have town council engaged on aviation matters, so it's not specific to an outside attorney outside of town council's firm.
Okay.
It's
If the-
75 in the contingent for airplanes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the contingent doesn't pass, does that mean that that work doesn't get done? Or does that mean that you come to us for $75,000 to cover that from a reserve fund transfer or something like that next year?
It could be the latter.
Okay, because it's not really telling us now that you might need it, kind of takes that off the table of it being.
I think we're looking at one-time money for it in the non-contingent budget. We actually had a discussion about this last night, that, and that does not, that covers more than just airplane issues. That covers,
Like
there's a
I
lot
said,
of, we've got a Chapter 40B case under appeal up at the Housing Appeals Court. We've got other ongoing cases. So that, based on what we know and what we're, in the future is only a forecast, we're projecting that we're going to have some increased costs this year. As it is, in the airplane context alone, we're going to have an environmental assessment that's going to be done by the FAA on the runway 4L, and that's something that we're starting to think about, we're going to be preparing for, we're going to be participating in. So we know we're going to have some additional costs. We've already incurred additional costs as we're responding every year to the environmental data report and different things. But there's other areas too. It's not just this one particular issue. There's other issues that are included in that. And the idea would be that we'd be seeking probably free cash.
So-
That's something that the town administrator is going to be,
Right.
as he breaks it down what the request would be, that's something that might be considered for it.
So let me flip it around. We know that we're going to have that, so why aren't we asking for it as non-contingent? We're asking for it as contingent.
Well, the
but we're
non-contingent
saying that we're
doesn't, the non-contingent budget, I mean, right now, the way it's been handled, at least in the recent years, is the kind of free cash has been kind of handled outside of the departmental budget process. So I believe that's probably why Ms. Fagan, who prepared this, didn't build it into that and was viewing it, based on some conversations I had with her, we were thinking it more of, that might be part of the free cash list rather than the non-contingent departmental budget.
But that's still going to be more than 250, which is the non-contingent part for that, and you know that it's going to be more than that. You should be accounting for that and not figuring out that we'll use
We're
one
we're
time.
accounting for it because it's going to be, there's no guarantee it's going to be recurring year to year, so it'd be a one-time expense, depending.
I get that,
Yeah.
but it should be in the contingent budget, the non-contingent budget as a cost for which we need some one-time money. It shouldn't be in here as a, because it says here, and that's what threw me off, I've increased the dollar amount to $325,000 to account for the potential costs associated with noise experts and aviation experts to assist the town with mitigating ongoing impact of the disproportionate increase in airplane traffic. It doesn't say anything else, so that's what led me to think that it was a $75,000 price tag to it. But nevertheless, if we know that it's going to be more than $250,000, the budget should be in the contingent, non-contingent, I keep flipping those around, it should cover whatever we think that's going to be.
Amy, do you want to pull a chair up? I see you trying to respond to this question.
Why don't you sit here, Amy? Take the microphone.
I just want to say that I think the confusion is with the one-time requests and how those were handled. Consolidated Facilities did include one-time requests in their budget. You guys took it out. I think there's just some inconsistencies, how different department heads included their one-time requests.
Under fiscal year,
Most of them didn't put it in the
under fiscal year
non-contingent.
17 appropriated, we have $87,000. That money came from a reserve fund transfer, is that right?
I don't recall. I assume
Okay.
it's part of the
So
169 budget
that,
adjustment.
it really kind of looks like the 87,000 was in the budget in 17, but I think that it wasn't operational money. But the point is that you're treating the two columns, non-contingent and contingent, differently. In the non-contingent, you're hoping to fill that gap with free cash, and in contingent, you're saying, okay, we wouldn't need the free cash, we would put it in. But if you know that you're going to spend the money, my preference would be, and I think I'm hearing what Steve's preference would be to put that $75,000 in the non-contingent and have us work the budgets with that number in there.
Okay, I just would suggest then you do the same and put the 78.5 back into consolidated, because it's similar. Every year he spends that.
Change the 80-20.
Yeah.
No, it isn't, because you could
35,
say it's
65.
one time and non-contingent. That's all, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm looking at it wrong, I'm looking at them
wants to spend
similar,
more.
right? So a lot of the departments didn't put one-time requests in here. Consolidated did put it down on the one-time line, and it was taken out. I think when this budget was done, Anne Marie did this one, I think there's just an inconsistency of how it was represented.
I take it we can't guess how many years into the future this amount of money would be needed, right?
Well, I think it's, to Ms. Collins' point, I think it's other, such as airplanes this year, and then there'll be something other the next
Right.
year. And that's why
So then that,
it's in the contingent request.
so that
Whereas-
feels like, all right, so that feels just like your point on the consolidated facility.
Right,
We
it's
probably need a permanent
Need it,
increase
but
to this
it's
budget.
not going to always be airplanes, hopefully,
Okay.
right? If it's
Yeah.
always going to be airplanes for the next 10 years, then we have a really big problem. I think that was the logic behind why she didn't include it in the non-contingent, but included it in the
Right.
contingent. Other dash airplanes, and
These are
we,
estimated costs, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no hard numbers here, these are projections,
I understand.
and it's hard to project, but she put in a number that she thought was,
Right.
made sense for where we are this year, and this is often based on just a rolling average, and at the end of last year, we had a
Katie,
significant
why don't
amount-
you pull a chair up and the three of you just stay there? Yeah.
You're correct. At the end of the fiscal year last year,
Yep.
we had a very significant reserve fund
Right.
transfer for legal services, and it varies from year to year. It just depends on how
Right.
much activity and litigation and other cases
Right.
are pending at any time.
Law's a funny one, and
Yes.
it's one that, it makes me nervous because it is a bill, but it's a bill you don't know and you can't approximate a lot of times, unfortunately. I wish there was a way for us to get our arms around it better, and, I have some concerns about how much we could spend on airplane noise mitigation and how much we as a town want to spend. Seems like $75,000 for fiscal year 18 is not an outrageous amount, but, I'm but one opinion. Other people, observations about this budget? Based on, hold on one second, based on what Amy just said, I'm inclined to treat this budget like we treated consolidated facilities, leaving that 75,000 in the contingent request and having my side list of requests for one-time money. I know we said we weren't going to use any one-time money for operating, but this kind of feels like it's in a quasi-gray zone because we don't know if this is going to reoccur or not. But tell me if
Based
I'm
on that, I was
off
going
base.
to make a motion to
Okay.
accept the contingent and non-contingent budget as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Jean. Discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 3 opposed. Any abstain? Okay, the motion carries. All right. Moving on from law. Personnel Board is up next.
Okay.
Oh, can you handle that?
Yeah.
This page isn't
Yeah.
We're working on the 1213 revision. Anybody is following along? There is a narrative on the last tab here. It's a square. Let me to increase that. All right, so I do not have any questions about this budget. It's very straightforward to me.
I have a question.
Steve?
How long have we been out without the assistant town administrator for human resources or whatever we're going to call it?
We haven't. That's the 37% reduction. Paige started in February?
She started in
Okay.
February of last year, but she came in at a lower salary
Oh.
than the former TA, assistant TA was at. That's
Okay.
the
That's the
reduction
reduction.
that you're seeing.
And half of her salary is paid through Personnel Board, and the other half is paid through Selectman's Office.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion to approve contingent, non-contingent as
Could I
presented.
just see that narrative again, because I didn't see it, I'm sorry, it's quite up. So they, what is the non-contingent, what they want to?
It says the fiscal year 18 non-contingent and contingent budget request for Personnel Board is 46,856. The decrease in salary and wages is due to a personnel change.
So they're decreasing by 46,000 or asking for an additional?
No, the
That's what they're asking for, the total.
The decrease
$6,000. No, that is
Sev-
6,000. Here's, you
Yeah.
can have
Oh,
that.
thank you.
from 5,372 to 45,086. Okay, there's a motion on the table.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Selectmen is next. I'm looking at the 1213 revision. Overshot there a little bit, sorry. Okay. This has got a very lengthy narrative for not a giant budget, but I appreciate the information. There were some little things that stuck out on this to me that where I would think that you might want to look to tighten it up in the future, but overall, I didn't have a ton of questions. Does anybody else have any before I go? Michael, did you have anything? No? Let me see, it was office supplies. I guess maybe you're trying to ramp it down a little bit, but your actuals in fiscal year 16 were 4,500, and then that was an aberrant year, so we decreased it to 1,800, and now you're looking to increase it again in non-contingent to 2,000 and contingent to 3,000. So it's a little bit up and down there for me. Is there any explanation for what's going on there?
I don't know what happened in 16. I know that 17 appropriation was 1872, and it looks like Anne Marie just wanted to keep that level, nearly level funded. Am I looking at non-contingent? Yeah.
Not a big concern. It's just stuck out a little bit to me, but it's small amount.
Motion to approve contingent, non-contingent as presented.
Second.
I heard Jean. Any discussion? All those in favor? Looks unanimous. Thank you. Okay, town reports is next. We're almost there, everyone.
This is easy.
Okay. This is where the warrant comes from and where the town report comes from. You saw in the narrative that they're decreasing the budget because they're decreasing the forecast for the number of reports that we'll need. Anybody have any questions about that? Maggie?
Yes, as you are well aware, it costs money to print all of these items. And we do so out of the goodness of our heart. Is there any way, we've discussed this, you said you've discussed, that this should be some type of line item to help us defray the costs of printing all of these documents on our own?
There is a budget for the warrant committee, and I think we should take that up when we discuss the warrant committee budget. And I personally am open to reimbursing some folks for some printing because it is an amazing amount of printing. If others on the committee are into that, we could take a vote and talk about maybe reimbursing everybody for an ink cartridge or something, or some other way of making it so that people could print. I don't think that the solution is to have Julia print everything for everybody, but maybe she can help with some things. But I have a feeling that people are more comfortable printing as needed at home if you're not looking at it on the computer. But why don't we, if you don't mind, why don't we take that up under the warrant committee budget? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions for Amy or Mr. Dennehy on Warrant's town report?
Motion approved.
Michael, I heard you. Do you want to second that? All right. The secretary seconded it. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
I'll keep my mouth shut from now on. Okay.
Unemployment. So unemployment's a funny one, if you didn't catch on already, because it kind of moves in an opposite direction than expected. Because if you are in a non-contingent budget scenario where you're having a potential override year, you might need to be laying people off. So you need to have a higher non-contingent than contingent budget. So we got a good narrative for this with great math that showed us the history. And I would say that I was a little bit surprised with the 130,000. I thought it looked a little low. I was wondering why, Amy, it was based on sort of a rolling average rather than an estimated number of FTEs that might be affected.
Because when I did the budget, I had no idea what the shortfall would be or what those FTEs were. I agree, the 130 probably won't be enough based upon the discussions that we've had with different departments. What that number is, I don't know, but this would be a situation where you would probably have to look to the reserve fund if it's not properly funded in the contingent, non-contingent, or whatever, if the override were to fail.
Is there any sort of, round math for a per person? I mean,
No.
salaries are so different, but is there anything, should we act on this as is, or do you think that there's anything more that you can do, knowing that the impact is now about 1.5 million, if you could guesstimate how much of that would be on an employee rather than services,
So I will tell you that the majority of the expenditure is usually school-related. So if they're laying off 18.4, I think I heard loud and clear today, most of them are going to get a new job immediately. So maybe it won't go up that much.
Steve?
So.
That's not
but
how
it's-
that works, though.
How does that work then?
Because if they get the notice that they're not being reemployed until they've found a new job and started, they can collect that. I remember
Even
this
though
from
we're
10
paying
years.
them now? Okay.
They're getting paid now, they get let go at the end of the year, and they can collect until they start the new job.
September.
Right, but I'm saying
For the
that you're
summer.
not looking at somebody being employed for a significantly long
Unemployed,
period of time, unemployed.
Well,
Depends.
20 people times
Well,
12 weeks is a
Okay, well,
heft of
according to
money.
what the schools represented it to us earlier, those people are all
No,
going
but
to get
Steve's
gobbled
No,
point
no,
is,
but
even if they
they-
all get jobs.
So they can collect for the whole summer.
for 2 months, right.
Well,
So, all right, so let's back up. No, I do not have a
not an
crystal ball on
insignificant
this
amount.
whatsoever. I have no idea what it would be.
and if some of them don't get rehired,
Hold on. Let me go to Jonathan.
Amy's absolutely right, because the scenario that they painted was voluntary leave based on the fact that they might lose their job.
If the,
There's no.
if the override does not pass, they will get pink slipped and can start collecting based on that pink slip until they start a new job.
Right.
Which would be 10 weeks or 11 weeks over the summer, irrespective of whether they get that job June 1st. Unless things have changed since, because this was, going back a ways, but this is how, because I was astonished by it too, that you leave a job, have a new job, and have really no gap in pay, but you could collect, and that's the case.
Well, I think there's no crystal ball, but they clearly said tonight those people would be accepting jobs before they got pink slip. I mean, we can argue this all night long. We're not, you don't.
Hold on. Let's not talk over each other.
Sorry.
Brian, you had something?
No, just I agree with Amy. We can't have it both ways. If the narrative they put out there is that we're risking losing good teachers, and we likely are, that they're going to find new jobs, we can't also say, oh, we don't have enough because they're going to collect unemployment for an extended period of time. I think the assumption, I'm comfortable with the assumption where it is right now. We can't have it both ways.
Jonathan,
We're
did you
nervous
have
they're going to find
something?
new jobs, or we're nervous that they're going to collect unemployment for an extended period of time. Let's not have it both ways.
And if I can add, these higher years, if you look at the trend, these years where the expenditure was very high and we had these, I recall that they had extended benefits back there and people were allowed to collect much longer. Those extended benefits no longer apply. So by taking the average of all years of 124,000, I'm including those years where they had extended benefits, and then I'm tacking on, additional 30,000 or whatever it is.
3%.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that it could very possibly be low, but should it be 250? Should it be 300? Should it be 1? I don't know. There's just
But
no way I can tell.
between when you submitted this and today, you wouldn't change it, is what you're saying? Final budgets are due yesterday. And I just want to make the best
I'd say you roll the
decision.
dice and
RTF.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question or
to lay
comment
off a
on this?
teacher to increase this, to their point, increase this 58,000, that might mean another teacher, another body, which then increases this.
Right.
Why don't you roll the dice and,
Yep. Anybody else?
Motion to approve contingent and non-contingent as presented.
Second?
I heard Michael. Any other discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 2 opposed. Any abstains? Okay, the motion carries. All right. That completes our budgets for tonight. I think we know our schedule. It remains unchanged. Anybody else have any comments before we adjourn?
Second.
What did you say?
Motion to adjourn.
And you seconded it? All those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned.